Chapter 838. This chapter is the Battle Song of Raging Fire. Compared to the small Lake Horn tribe with 186 people, the Mountain Horn tribe was a big tribe with more than 1,000 people. There were more than 80 ancient sorcerers in the tribe. However, according to the ancient sorcerers of the Lake Horn tribe, the listener of the Mountain Horn tribe, which was equivalent to the great elder of the tribe, was at most an archmage. As for the strength of the listener of the bigger tribe, the ancient sorcerers of the Lake Horn tribe didn't know. The Moonkiller people didn't know the level of the ancient sorcerers. Most of them got the position of listener through hard work. It just so happened that the older the caster, the more powerful they were. Therefore, the listener was usually the most powerful one in the tribe. When the two sword saints, Duarte and Claus, led a large group of Earth Knights to the Mountain Horn tribe, the listener and the ancient sorcerers were quickly captured. After the Knights' warrior energy connected to form a forbidden area, the magic of the ancient sorcerers became ineffective. As for those ordinary warriors, no matter how accurate their arrows were or how sharp their swords and spears were, they were no match for the knight with warrior energy. Soon the whole process of encircling, killing and capturing was completed. The Mountain Horn tribe with more than 1,000 people was completely destroyed in a short time. After tying up the Moonkiller people, they began to search for the resources in the settlement of the Mountain Horn tribe. The trainee knight who didn't need to charge carried out the task of packing well. They almost turned the whole settlement upside down and took away any kind of resources. On the blazing island, all the resources had to be self-reliant. The knight hadn't felt the pleasure of plundering for a long time. I didn't expect this small indigenous tribe to be so rich in resources. List didn't ride a dragon. He rode a warhorse and followed the orders of chivalry. Your Highness, it's summer now. The forest is relatively rich in food. If we wait until winter, this forest won't be able to provide food. The indigenous people can only starve if they don't farm, Duarte replied. He had learned about the climate problem of the blazing island from the indigenous people of the Lake Horn tribe. There were 4 seasons here: spring, summer, autumn and winter. Spring and summer were hot and humid, but plants grew vigorously and food was abundant. During autumn and winter the climate was dry and cold. Plants stopped growing, and animals either migrated or hibernated. Food was scarce. It was currently summer, the most fertile season of the year on Flame Island. The Moonkiller people did not know how to farm, so they could only live according to the seasons. That was why they divided into small tribes and migrated further into the forest to survive. However, those who knew how to farm could rely on the good climate and hydrology of spring, summer, and autumn to grow abundant food to cope with the winter. The adults of the Mountain Horn tribe were quickly rushed to the Whirlpool River to chop down trees with shackles on their feet. The women were in charge of turning over the land and carrying sundries. The elderly and children were sent to the Inferno Plain, where the elderly were in charge of some light manual labor, and the children received serf education. The ancient sorcerer was taken away by the sorcerers, and more information about the Moon Men was obtained through them. September was the beginning of autumn on Blazing Island. A week had passed since the capture of the Mountain Horn tribe. During this week, List and Achi had sent 10 large frame ships of serfs and supplies. The scale of the Inferno town was getting bigger and bigger, and it was developing like the Inferno city. A group of shipbuilders were also sent over to build sampans on the edge of the Whirlpool River. Relying on the sampans, they continuously sent manpower and material resources to the downstream of the Whirlpool River to assist the pioneer team in opening up the Whirlpool River residential area. From time to time, a knight could be seen supervising a large number of Moonmen aborigines working on the shore. For the time being, the Moonmen did not know how to farm or work, so they could only chop down trees, turn over the land and carry materials. Without the concept of protecting the water and soil, wherever the knight of the pioneer team identified a suitable place to build a residential area, they would cut down trees madly, and then began to level the land and build wooden houses. It was wet and rainy in spring and summer, so wooden houses were the most suitable houses for living. The Moonmen of the Lake Horn tribe and the Mountain Horn tribe were the first batch of new serfs. Later, orders of chivalry captured several small tribes such as the Treehorn tribe, the River Horn tribe and the Black Horn tribe, which were separated from the Mountain Horn tribe and made them all serfs. The ancient sorcerers were sent to the Master Tower. Imprisonment and research. List personally presided over the exploration of the Moonmen. Through constant communication and research of the Moon language, he finally figured out the general situation of the Moonmen. The listener of the Mountain Horn tribe was called Kuei, and the tribesmen called him Kuei. When Kuei was young, he had traveled through the forest and visited many large tribes like the Mountain Horn tribe. Some large tribes occupied the most fertile forests and even had a population of more than 10,000. In all the tribes, there were ancient sorcerers who mastered extraordinary magic and precious knowledge. He communicated with the ancient sorcerers to learn about the world, himself, the future, and the past. The ancestors of the Moon Men were a group of great sorcerers. They once fought side by side with dragons and another group of evil dragons. They killed a dragon called the Moon. The ancestors of the Moon Men slept on the distant sacred mountain, and their descendants reproduced from the sacred mountain and spread all over the forest. Under the pressure of the sorcerers, Kuei talked about what he had seen and heard. However, there were no more records about the dragon called the Moon in their legends, and Kuei himself did not even know what a dragon was. The blazing island had probably never been visited by a dragon. Kuei's narration soon attracted List's attention. In the far northwest there lived a large tribe, the Horn Tribe. The Mountain Horn Tribe split from the Horn Tribe hundreds of years ago. The Horn Tribe guarded a broken tower, which was the authority established by their ancestors, and worshipped the treasures left by them. Ask Kuei carefully where the Horn Tribe is. Yes, Your Highness. After being interrogated by the sorcerers, Kuei could not describe the location of the Horn Tribe. He had never traveled to the Horn Tribe and only knew its approximate location. Even if he looked at the map of the blazing island, he could not figure it out. He could only make a preliminary judgment that the Horn Tribe was not in the swirling river. Looking at the map, List made a simple guess. The Mountain Horn Tribe is downstream of the swirling river, and the Horn Tribe is in the northwest about this place. He drew a circle in a certain area on the map and decided to look for it himself. In his opinion, the so-called Broken Tower should be a wizard tower left by the ancient sorcerers, and the native tribe's treasure mentioned in the smoke mission might be stored in it. Since the ancient sorcerers could fight side by side with dragons, they were very likely to be magic shooters, and only the items left by magic shooters could be called treasures. It's a pity that Kuei doesn't know how many tribes there are in the Moonmen tribe, so the smoke mission can't be completed for now. List felt a bit regretful. However, when he called out the smoke mission and confirmed it habitually, he suddenly found that the smoke had changed. Chapter 839. The goal of the previous mission was to find out the origin of the indigenous tribe's cultivation system and figure out the development of the indigenous tribe. List felt that he had not figured out either of these 2 points. Therefore, it was very unexpected that the mission could be completed. Or is what Kuei said the real history? The ancient mages came to Blazing Island and fought side by side with the dragons. They killed many evil dragons, including a dragon called the Moon. Then they probably died and were buried in a mountain called the Holy Mountain. The descendants of the mages began to develop from the Holy Mountain into the forest and became the current Moonkiller tribe. The natives were divided into tribes, some larger and some smaller. The ones in charge of the tribes were all mages, but they were relatively weak. List touched his chin. So the Emerald Dragon, Fire Dragon, and even the Smoke Dragon all participated in that ancient war? He suddenly thought of the Emerald Dragon's hind leg. Could it be the work of the Moon Dragon that could directly make a smooth cut on the hind leg of a sacred dragon like the Emerald Dragon? But the question was, what kind of dragon was the Moon Dragon? If there was a Moon Dragon, would there be a Sun Dragon or even various Star Dragons? Could these dragons be categorized as astral dragons? Of course, this was just his boring guess. He did not even know if the Moon Dragon was related to the moon. He cast his eyes on the newly changed smoke serpentines. Mission: you have some understanding of the situation of the indigenous tribe, so how to develop the indigenous tribe is the top priority. Before that, why not find the Holy Mountain and investigate the secrets of the ancient mages? Please explore the Holy Mountain. Reward: the entrance to the ruins. Holy Mountain. Kuei had never been to the Holy Mountain and did not know where it was, but this was not important. Orders of Chivalry had already made preparations for a large-scale search and killing of the Moonkiller tribe, and he himself was ready to take action. Since he already understood that the Moonkiller tribe was not a threat to him, as a Dragon Knight, he naturally could roam the entire Blazing Island without caring about any obstacles. However, List did not immediately start searching for the Holy Mountain. He decided that before that, he would first complete the work that he had not been able to find time to complete, drawing the topographic map of Blazing Island. At present, Blazing Island only relied on a chi to draw the outline of the island. There was no data on the internal terrain of the island. This was an obstacle for the overall development of Blazing Island. Do what you think. After assigning the task of capturing the natives of the Moonkiller tribe, he rode on the invisible dragon Bard and began to explore the surroundings of the river vortex. He did not fly close to the ground but instead flew over from a high altitude. He used the sextant to calculate his position at any time and drew the terrain according to the outline of the Flame Island. First of all, the southeast part of the island was a hilly and flat area. There weren't many mountain ranges, and the Vortex Mountain was one of the few mountain ranges. The rest were all short mountains. Lush and verdant, almost all of it was wrapped in a green primeval forest. There was a small number of Moonkiller native tribes in this area, but their area of activity was not large. It was likely that they had not found a foothold in the forest. The mana in the forest was very active, and it was inferred that there was a large number of World of Warcraft living here. It was difficult for the Moonkiller native tribes to compete with World of Warcraft for living space. It took him 5 days to draw the topographic map of the southeast region. Apart from the Whirlpool River, he found 2 smaller river basins. These were all places that could be developed as residential areas. After that, he patrolled the central region of the island. The forest in the central region was gradually becoming less dense, and the terrain was very flat. There were only a few trees in some areas, revealing the barren land. Apart from the 2 east-west mountain ranges in the center, there was no other complex terrain. There was also a river that was bigger than the Whirlpool River. On the ground there were many Moonkiller native tribes. They did not form cities, and they all existed in the form of primitive tribal settlements. By the time the topographic map of the central region was drawn, it was already late September. List patrolled the northwest part of the island without stopping. After searching for only 3 days, he suddenly found a group of volcanoes that were emitting smoke. In the crystal white orbit, these volcanoes were all full of rich volcano supermagic, and they were all active volcanoes. 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 9 active volcanoes. List was greatly surprised. He was worried that Leo could not get a volcano for training, but he did not expect that there were 9 active volcanoes on this land, and each volcano was full of vitality. Bard, let's go to the biggest volcano. He did not inform the little fire dragon Leo, who was sleeping in his body, and continued to move forward with the invisible dragon. The volcanoes were distributed in a large plain area, and each volcano was a typical cylindrical volcano. The volcanoes were high and low, big and small, and the mountains were also divided into those with trees and those without. There were also many extinct volcanoes in the surroundings, which had been damaged by weathering and had become a part of the forest. Only the 9 connected active volcanoes were still emitting smoke, and they stretched across the end of the land. The invisible dragon flew with all its might, and came to the top of the largest active volcano. It immediately saw that the center of the huge volcano contained continuously tumbling magma. It seemed as if it would erupt at any time. So big! List exclaimed. The diameter of this volcano was definitely more than 2,000 meters, and it was slightly oval in shape, slightly wide from east to west, and slightly narrow from north to south. There were no plants on the outside of the volcano, only thick black rocks. The inner wall of the volcano was slanted toward the center, and in the center of the volcano was the magma-spewing channel, which was at least 1 to 200 meters in diameter. It was countless times larger than the volcano List saw on the Dodo Island. Especially when he flew toward the inside of the volcano with the invisible dragon Bard, he felt like a fly flying into a bottle. He suddenly felt how big the world was and how small he was. After circling around the inner wall of the volcano, List rode Bard back to the top of the volcano. He jumped down from Bard's back and stood at the top of the crater, which was shaped like a blade. On his left was the bottomless crater, and on his right was the sloping mountain. Looking at the shape, it could be imagined that a volcanic eruption had occurred here 1 or 2 years ago. The crisscrossing and cracked ravines on the mountain were the best evidence of the magma flowing through it. If this volcano erupted, how powerful would it be? List found it hard to imagine. He looked at the scenery for a long time, and after soothing his shock, he signaled Bard to go invisible. I'm going to release Leo and let it cultivate here, Bard. Wuxia. Bard was not a dragon that liked to compete for favor. He had no interest in paying attention to the rash little fire dragon. He directly concealed his figure and flew toward the other craters. So List summoned the little fire dragon Leo. Rumble. Flames soared into the sky and quickly turned into the little fire dragon Leo with black and red scales. It had a wingspan of 26 meters and a body length of 26 meters. In its infancy stage, it had already surpassed the size of an adult invisible dragon. Brr. Leo let out a majestic roar. In the next moment, the whole dragon suddenly froze, staring blankly at the huge crater below. Leo, I promised you that I would find a crater for you to cultivate in. Now is the time for me to fulfill my promise. List put his hands behind his back and looked at Leo indifferently. Cultivate well here. I will come to see you often and bring you the food you need. Roar. Leo looked at List and let out an intimate roar. Then, it folded its wings and rushed toward the crater in a free-fall motion. In the next moment. Chapter 840. Endless Volcanoes. This was the name List had given to the 9 active volcanoes. He called the largest one Mount Doomsday. He had a feeling that if this volcano erupted, its power would be enough to destroy the world. Hence, when he summoned Leo, he specifically told him to suppress the volcano supreme demon and try his best to eliminate the possibility of an eruption. It was not easy to find such a suitable island to build a kingdom on, and he did not want it to be destroyed by a volcano. This Endless Volcanoes is Leo's perfect dragon nest. The next step is to find a suitable place for Ethan to build a dragon nest. List pondered as he stood above the crater of Mount Doomsday. The light green gemstone dragon was a gemstone dragon, a production-type dragon. It needed to build a dragon nest as soon as possible to develop a gemstone mine. As for the invisible dragon Bard, it did not need a fixed dragon nest. It would be more comfortable to build a teleportation circle like the Great Maelstrom. Let's go, Bard. We'll continue patrolling Blazing Island. Summoning Bard, the man and dragon continued their journey. Apart from the endless volcanoes, there were many undulating mountain ranges in the northwest of Blazing Island. The terrain was mostly high, but there were also many valleys and basins suitable for living. Generally speaking, the northwest of Blazing Island was full of undulating mountains, the center was dry and full of plains, and the southeast was humid and full of rivers. Judging from the terrain alone, the whole of Fiery Island was basically an area suitable for farming. There was no land that was too dangerous or barren. After spending the entire September, it was October of year 154 of the Sapphire calendar. The topographic map of Blazing Island was finally completed. Based on the map, he had a general plan on how to develop Blazing Island. He also had 2 choices for the location of the capital. One was the Great Plains in the center of Blazing Island. It was accessible from all directions and it was next to a huge lake, so there was no shortage of water. However, the Great Plains did not have any geographical barriers, so it was easy to attack and hard to defend. The capital could be threatened at any time. The other was another mountain range in the southeast, next to the Maelstrom Mountain. The capital could be built in the valley at the foot of the mountain. The hydrology and geography were excellent. As long as the exits on both sides of the valley were blocked, no matter how many knights there were, they would not be able to charge in. The palace could also be built on the mountain, forming a corner with the capital. Actually, with the dragons, it doesn't matter if the capital is blocked by steep cliffs or not. The benefits of building a capital on the Great Plains are obvious. Unfortunately, I don't have the strength to develop the Great Plains for now. I'll build the capital in this valley first. It's not far from the Great Whirlpool, so it'll be easier to develop. After comparing in his heart, he decided on the location of the capital. Then he named the mountain range Blazing Mountain and the valley Blazing Valley. The future capital was temporarily named Fire King City. The Blaze family was proud of the fire dragon, so it was appropriate to name it this way. However, the name was only temporary. That was because List already had 3 dragons, and it was unknown how many more he would have in the future. Since they dared to directly establish a kingdom, it meant that they were not afraid of other dragons being exposed. When the time came, which dragon should they name it after? It was hard to say. Rolling up the map, List and Bard walked on the material boundary and quickly flew toward the Vortex Mountain. During this period of time, he had been continuously mapping the terrain, and he had become more and more proficient in working with the invisible dragon. Not only did he achieve complete spiritual harmony, but he also created 3 moves of the invisible Dragon Knight, Dragon Battle Energy Secret Book. They were Ghost, which involved the left and right horizontally and paid attention to the word Wipe, Shadow, which focused on the tip of the dragon spear and paid attention to the word Lift, and Snow Mountain, which focused on the word Collapse. Ghost, Wipe, Shadow, Lift, Snow Mountain, Collapse. These 3 powerful battle skills were mainly assassination skills, which suited his position of the invisible dragon. The invisible dragon's body only had a wingspan of 15 meters, and even an adult dragon could only have a wingspan of 20 meters. In a head-on battle, it didn't have any advantages in other aspects, except for its dragon breath, which could shatter the material space. Therefore, the invisible Dragon Knight should walk the assassin's path, suddenly charging out from the material boundary and dealing the most powerful blow. Only elemental dragons like Little Fire Dragon Leo, who had thick skin and flesh and was larger than other dragons when they were young, were suitable to walk the path of head-on melee battles. Unfortunately, his proficiency level hadn't increased much recently. The Fire Dragon Knight, Dragon Battle Energy Secret Manual still only had 5 moves. Dragon Slash, Heaven Burning Sweep, Sun Swallowing Stab, Sea Boiling Twist and Earth Shaking Hammer. As for the Light Green Gem Dragon Ethan, the Light Green Gem Dragon Knight, Dragon Battle Energy Secret Book, was researched by generations of Dragon Knight, and it had 7 moves: Moonlight, Green Shadow, Thunder, Spiral, Stone Break, Forest and Phantom. List had only practiced it a little with Ethan, and he hadn't improved it. List didn't plan it to be a battle-type dragon at all. Unfortunately, I only have 1 dragon, and it's troublesome to allocate time to 3 dragons. It was troublesome when there were only a few dragons, and it was also troublesome when there were more dragons. Looking at the white spatial structure in his field of vision, he sighed silently. There's nothing perfect in this world. Their minds were harmonized, and the invisible dragon sensed his true thoughts. It responded with a sound that was unknown whether it was in agreement or mockery. When he returned to the infernal plains, it was completely different from a month ago. There were no longer any trees in the entire infernal plains. Everything had been cut down and turned into flat land. Wizard towers, windmills, irrigation water wheels and city water towers were built one after another. A gravel road stretched from east to west in the infernal plains, directly leading to the forest in the distance that hadn't been cut down yet. Carriages sped on the road, transporting carts of wood, beasts and fruits back to Infernal Town. Infernal Town was completely different. Neat stone buildings stood on both sides of the cross-shaped street, and the flat stone road was crowded with horses and carriages. Tall wooden houses rose from the ground outside the town. These were all temporary residences for the increasing number of knight and serfs. The town was developing into a small city. In the upper reaches of the Whirlpool River, the architects were busy instructing the craftsmen to dig the foundation. A named castle would soon be built here as List's palace. As the master of the Flame Islands and the future king, his personal life was more important than the development of Flame Island. Countless pieces of wood and stone were piled up on one side. Wood could be obtained locally and inexhaustible. Most of the stone came from the Blizzard Beast Squad, and a small part came from the widening of the Whirlpool River. There was sufficient water in the upper reaches of the Whirlpool Mountain. As long as the river was widened, small sailboats could be directly navigated in the infernal plains. Only sailboats could quickly connect with the residential areas in the middle and lower reaches of the Whirlpool River. At the moment, by the Whirlpool River, there were a large number of yellow-skinned serfs working hard to dig the river. They were all the Moonkiller tribe's natives. They were captured by orders of chivalry and trained as serfs to work here. Your Royal Highness, because of the resistance of the Moonkiller tribe, although not many knight were killed in the capture, many of these natives were killed because of resistance, wasting their labor. Duarte Red Apricot, the chief commander of the slave capture, immediately rushed to report. But after the natives adapt to the life of serfs, they rarely escape, so I think it's time to change the way we capture slaves. Tell me what you think. List leaned back in the rocking chair, enjoying the little hands of the maids rubbing his shoulders and leisurely drinking the freshly brewed Bampo milk. The last time he transported the frame ship, he deliberately transferred a group of serving men and maids from Thorn Castle to Infernal Plains. The serving men headed by Thomas were sent by him to supervise the construction of the castle, while the young maids headed by Little Lily stayed in the temporary villa in Infernal Plains to serve List. Chapter 841. I think the main way to deal with the Moonkiller tribe should be to lure them, said Duarte. List could not deny it. Tell me more about your idea. Your Highness, our orders of chivalry have wiped out many Moonkiller tribes in the swirling river and captured nearly 30,000 serfs. However, as the number of serfs continues to increase, we will need to allocate a large number of knights for supervision and defense, which will seriously weaken the overall combat power of the Orders of Chivalry. Orders of Chivalry used knight squads as the main force to deal with a small tribe of 100 or 200 people. One knight squad was enough to carry out the capture. The 3 or 4 half-baked ancient sorcerers in the small tribe were no match for the knights at all. However, for a large tribe with thousands of people, one knight squad was not enough. Usually, 4 or 5 knight squads were needed to complete the capture. For a larger tribe with thousands of people, even a full Orders of Chivalry was needed to capture them, and they also had to prevent the ancient sorcerers from counterattacking. As the capture of the Moonkiller tribes went deeper, larger Moonkiller tribes also began to appear. A large tribe might have tens of thousands of people. In such a tribe, many ancient sorcerers had already reached the level of great sorcerers. Even the Orders of Chivalry would have to retreat when facing a volley of magic spells. If all the Orders of Chivalry in the Fire Territory participated in the capture, Even the largest moonkiller tribes would not be a problem. However, the number of orders of chivalry that arrived at the Fire Island was not enough. There were less than 1,600 Earth Knights and less than 2,000 apprentice knights here. They had to maintain the safety of the camp and capture the natives. Therefore, I want to use the quality of life in the territory to attract the moonkiller tribes to join us. As long as we can provide them with shelter and food, I believe a lot of moonkiller tribes will be tempted. Also, we can focus on tempting the ancient sorcerers of the moonkiller tribes. Lure the ancient sorcerers? List raised his eyebrows and signaled Durut to continue. The mages of the Guild of Magic are analyzing the magic inheritance of the ancient magicians. Inheritance of magic requires inheritance of knowledge first, so the inheritance of knowledge of the Moonslayers almost all happens among the ancient magicians. They are a group of indigenous higher-ups who pursue profit, and they are more easily controlled and corrupted by profit. The Moon Killers had lost the prosperous civilization of the Moon Empire. They lived in the forest and hunted and gathered for a living. Their living conditions were very difficult. Even the ancient sorcerers lived a hard life. In autumn and winter they were short of clothes and food. Durut said eloquently, "It's already October. The weather is turning cold, and the production of the forest is starting to decrease. The hard days of the Moonslayers are coming. This is a good opportunity for us to change our plan and replace capturing the Moonkiller serfs with enticement. As long as we corrupt the ancient sorcerers, no matter how many Moonslayers there are, they will all become serfs. Your suggestion sounds good. Since that's the case, let's gather all the regiment commanders of the Orders of Chivalry and the management of Firewood Town for a meeting to discuss this plan." The meeting was fixed for the evening. It was in the newly built administrative hall of Firewood Town. Before the meeting, he first invited Kenley Truth, the president of the Firewood Town's branch of magic, to ask about the ancient magicians and the sacred mountain. Kenley was originally in charge of research in the Whirlpool town of the Swirling Islands. With the discovery of the Moonslayers, she was transferred here to lead the research. "Your Highness." Kenley bowed. She was a magician who was obsessed with magic. Other than magic, she had almost no other interests. Her life revolved around magic. "You've studied many Moonslayer ancient magicians. How's the summary of the Moon language?" "The Moon language is very complicated. Although the Moonslayers mastered the Moon language, many of the words were gradually lost, especially the records of the ancient Moon Empire. It's almost blank. After our research, we've basically mastered the Moon language for daily communication." "What do you think about the magic inherited by the Moonslayers?" Kenley thought for a moment. "There's a certain significance. Some of the spells are already lost. If we improve them, they can shine. However, most of the spells inherited by the Moonslayers from the Moon Empire are too outdated. They consume a lot of magic and are not powerful." She then added with a sigh, "I used to look forward to the magicians of the Moon Empire. I thought that the magicians of today were far inferior to the magicians of that time. However, in terms of spell casting, the magicians of the Moon Empire are far inferior to the magicians of today. Times are changing. Although the magicians have declined, they have also become more adapted to the current era. Therefore, there's no need to look forward to the past. We should look forward to the future." Liz smiled. People all had this habit of valuing the past and neglecting the present. The more ancient something was, the less detailed it was, and the more elegant it felt. Part of it was nostalgia and part of it was the beauty of distance. The Moon Empire was a classic example of the beauty of distance and nostalgia. Of course, it was undeniable that the magicians ruled the era and created a glorious magic civilization. Energetic and curious magicians could study magic, souls, big projects, and even the nature of the world. That was what the magicians yearned for most. In this world, the night ruled everything. Profit was the most important thing. As for the nature of the world, it did not matter. Could studying the nature of the world bring profit? If not, why would they even bother to study it? If they had the time, they might as well drink more wine, dance more, and have intimate contact with each other. Liszt was also a knight. Although he recognized the spirit of research of the magicians, he still had to belittle the beautiful existence of the Moon Empire and be wary of the revival of the magicians. After chatting for a while, he finally got to the main topic. "Kenley, did the ancient sorcerer reveal the specific location of the sacred mountain?" "No ancient sorcerer has been to the sacred mountain. The sacred mountain is just a legend for the Moonslayers. They don't have a large range of activities, and they usually only travel among a few major tribes." "All right." Liszt furrowed his brows. He had thought that the smoke mission of find the sacred mountain and investigate the ancient sorcerer would be easy to complete. He just needed to interrogate the ancient sorcerer to find the sacred mountain. He did not expect that no one knew about the sacred mountain. However, although he did not find the sacred mountain, he had a clue about the reward of the last smoke mission, native treasure. He had figured out the location of the Horn tribe which guarded the treasure. After a meeting in the administrative office, it was decided that the main method of exchanging and killing the natives of the Moonslayers for serfs. Early the next morning, List rushed to the location of the Horn tribe. After some searching, he successfully found the Horn tribe, which had a population of more than 10,000. The location of the Horn tribe was not far from the Flame Mountain range where List was going to build the capital city. It belonged to a small mountain range. On a low mountain near the living area of the Horn tribe, he successfully found the broken tower, where the treasure was stored. There was no guard. The stone tower, which had collapsed by 2/3, was just surrounded by a circle of stones. There were traces of a bonfire on the platform next to it. Chapter 842. Descending from the back of the invisible dragon, List had no need to hide his figure and directly studied the broken stone tower. The stone tower should be the wizard tower of the ancient magic shooters, and its style could no longer be verified. It occupied a large area of several hundred square meters. The upper half had collapsed, and the lower half still had two well-preserved floors. The original wooden door had probably decayed, and the entrance was blocked by the moon killer with a large stone. Prying open the stone, List observed for a moment, and then walked into the stone tower. Sunlight shone in through the cracks in the walls, so the light was not too dark. It could be seen that the stone tower should have had a function similar to a library, with rows of stone-carved bookshelves. Unfortunately, there were no books on the bookshelves, only thick dust. The stairs were still there, carved from stone, and it was very solid to step on. Going up to the second floor, the huge room was empty, and it was unknown what it was used for. The floor on the side had been broken, and the sunlight penetrated, forming a huge bright spot. There were a few weeds growing in the bright spot. It seemed that this place was often exposed to the wind and the sun, and was not well protected. The treasure of the Aborigines should be here, so it is very likely that it was left by the ancient magic shooters. What is it? List released the magic eyes and began to scan the broken stone tower. He did not find the light of mana retroaction, nor did he find anything that looked like a treasure. The first floor was empty and the second floor was also empty. According to Kuei, the Mountain Horn Tribe's listener, the broken stone tower enshrined the treasure left by the ancestors. Kuei did not know what treasure it was, but now it seemed that even if there was a treasure, it was probably moved away because of the collapse of the stone tower. No, what Kuei said is the broken stone tower, which means that the stone tower should have collapsed at that time. What is going on? Let me go up and see. He walked to the place where the floor was broken and jumped directly. The third floor had collapsed halfway. However, unexpectedly, the magic eyes found a dim light of mana retroaction, emitting from the collapsed rubble. He quickly dug out the rubble and dug out the glowing object. It was a broken stone scepter with several stone-carved fingers attached to the handle. In other words, this stone scepter was originally part of a huge statue. The light of mana retroaction came from the top of the stone scepter, from the huge round gem carved from an unknown rock. However, the light was very obscure. It seems like it's wrapped in rocks, causing it to be unable to shine? List studied the stone for a moment and confirmed that it was not a magical item. He then gently knocked on the stone. After continuously exerting force, a crack finally appeared on the stone. Then, it completely shattered, revealing the real item inside. The light exploded in an instant, as if a lamp had been lit in the darkness. It wasn't until List dispersed his magic eyes that he saw a short metal scepter wrapped inside the stone scepter. The scepter was about the length of an adult's arm, and the tip was inlaid with a transparent gem that shone with 7 colors. The rich aura of magic power made List's heart palpitate. This was definitely a rare gemstone. It did not belong to any gemstone dragon. He slowly pulled out the metal scepter from the stone scepter and brought the gem on the top closer to his eyes. This gem had countless cross-sections, and each side was extremely smooth. It could reflect one's own face. However, when List began to notice the face on it, his pupils suddenly dilated. He saw the face in the reflection. It was the face of an old man. When he fiercely turned around, thinking that someone was approaching him, he found that there was no one behind him. There was only the invisible dragon dozing off on the distant hilltop. It was impossible for a creature to avoid the invisible dragon's detection and quietly approach him. That's... With great doubt, he once again looked at one of the cross-sections of the gem. This time, after the face in the reflection appeared, it turned into the face of a child. When he turned around again, there was still no one behind him. No one was approaching. The faces in the reflection could only be from the inside of the gem. Liszt calmed down a little and continued to observe. Sure enough, countless faces of different ages flashed across the countless cross-sections. But soon he was short of breath, because he found that these faces had one thing in common. They really looked too similar to Liszt's face. Several of the faces of young people were clearly Liszt's own face. When he blinked, the faces in the gem also blinked, whether it was the face of a child or the face of an old man. After studying it for a moment, he suddenly came to a realization. Interesting, the face reflected by this gem is the face of a different age. Sure enough, I've been handsome since I was young, and I've been charming at every age. What a strange gem, as if it has the magic of time. Huh? The magic of time? Liszt was suddenly startled. Time, the magic of time, this... Is it possible that this gem was produced by the Twilight Dragon, one of the sacred dragons? The Twilight Dragon represented the power of time. No one had seen it and no one knew what form it existed in. But now, holding this metal scepter and looking at the gem that reflected his faces of different ages, he suddenly linked the two together. Perhaps this gem was produced by the Twilight Dragon. The spatial gem produced by the invisible dragon formed an independent space. The special gem produced by the Twilight Dragon inevitably had the nature of time. He tried to put the metal scepter into his spatial ring and found that no matter how he wrapped it with magic power, the scepter could not be absorbed by the spatial ring. Especially when his magic power wrapped around the special gem, it was as if time had passed, and the magic power slowly dissipated. It could not be taken back. It really is magical. Perhaps this is the power of the Twilight Dragon, a kind of magic that involves time? Liszt was still not sure of the attributes of this gem. But this did not prevent him from temporarily naming it the Time Diamond. The metal scepter was the scepter of time. Holding the scepter and admiring the Time Diamond's colorful light under the sunlight, Liszt was very satisfied. Scepter of time, what magical and incredible power do you have? How did those ancient magic shooters use you? Does finding you mean finding clues to the Twilight Dragon? The invisible dragon was in his hands, the power of the smoke dragon was entangled, the emerald dragon found a corpse, and now the gem of the Twilight Dragon was in his hands. Only the fairy dragon, which represented life, was left to cross paths with Liszt. Maybe one day he could gather all 5 holy dragons and become the world's most powerful holy dragon knight. Of course, the holy dragon might not be the most magical dragon. The weave dragon should be the most terrifying dragon I have ever seen, and the moon dragon is probably a tyrannical dragon. These 2 dragons seem to be stronger than the holy dragon. Picking up the scepter of time and coming into contact with the Twilight Dragon clues, he was very satisfied with today's harvest. He inserted the scepter of time into his belt and focused his attention on the stone scepter that had been smashed. What was the intention of the ancient magic shooters to hide the scepter of time, a magical equipment that looks like a divine artifact in a sculpture? I remember that the tear of the mermaid found in the Temple of Fish Clown was also hung on a statue of a mermaid. It seems that these ancient powerhouses like to make statues of themselves? He kept rummaging through the rubble trying to find other parts of the statue, but he could not find the rest of the statue. Chapter 843. Holding the scepter of time and riding the invisible dragon Bard, Liszt hid in the material boundary and explored the use of the scepter in his hand. The time diamond, which shone with a colorful luster, was very peculiar. It could not be stimulated by qi, and any magic power that approached its surface would slowly dissipate. It was as if it had been condensed into eternal time magic. But since it was made into a magic equipment, it showed that there must be a way to control it. I don't know how big the Twilight Dragon is, but it should be much bigger than the invisible dragon. After all, the time diamond produced by it is the size of a fist, while the space gem produced by the invisible dragon is only the size of a fingernail. Liszt thought as he shook the scepter in his hand. Unfortunately, no matter how he pondered along the way, he still could not figure out how to control the scepter of time. It seemed that he would have to trouble a qi. With a qi's identity as an archmage, coupled with his increasingly rich knowledge and intelligent brain, it should not be too difficult to figure out how to use the scepter of time. Back in Firewood Town. Before he could find a qi, he received a shocking piece of news from the Guild of Magic, which was reported to him by Kenley Truth. Your Highness, we have deciphered how the ancient sorcerers passed down magic. Many of the ancient sorcerers who killed the Moonmen were far less talented than the modern sorcerers, but they succeeded in learning magic by relying on magic powder. Magic dust? Liszt was puzzled. Kenley's next words shocked him. The magic powder can increase a magician's affinity with magic, and the magic powder is made from elves. Sprites? Yes. List's face quickly turned gloomy. He suddenly understood why he had not found a single sprite worm despite capturing so many Moonslayer tribes. He originally thought that the Moonslayer did not know how to use sprite worms, but now it seemed that the Moonslayer tribes only used them differently. According to Kenley's subsequent explanation, the magic inheritance of the Moonslayer tribes was completely exposed. When small tribes found sprite worms in the process of hunting and gathering, they would sell them to large tribes as trading items in exchange for living supplies. The listeners of large tribes mastered the method of using sprite worms to produce magic dust. By relying on the magic dust, the listeners of large tribes could cultivate more ancient wizards. These ancient magicians were all outstanding children selected by various tribes. They relied on the tribe's resources in exchange for the right to learn magic. Elves, magic dust, ancient magicians. The Moonslayer relied on such means to ensure that the legacy of the ancient magicians would not be lost. With the help of the ancient mage, the Horde would be able to snatch resources from World of Warcraft. Perhaps it was another way for the elves to farm. Although it was cruel, it was normal for the Moonslayer. Only, the small tribes did not know that sprite worms were used to produce magic power dust, which was a monopoly technology exclusively grasped by the listeners of the large tribes. Unforgivable. After understanding the cause and effect, List's expression was rather ugly. The number of elves in the wild was already very small, and the Moonslayer were hunting them down in large numbers. It could be said that there would be no elves in the Moonslayer's territory. The living area of the Moon Killers might have occupied most of the forests of Blazing Island, killing sprite worms generation after generation. God knows how many sprite worms had died tragically. Your Highness, if the listeners of the Moonslayer did not lie, then the method of using sprite worms to produce magic power dust is also inherited from the Moon Empire. Kenley's voice was somewhat gloomy. In the current era, elves were already synonymous with beautiful things. Although some greater aristocrats would still use elves to secretly forge elven weapons, the act of killing elves was generally considered to be immoral. In the era of the Moon Empire, which wizards yearned for, it seemed that the cultivation of wizards relied on the killing of elves. This was a huge blow to Kenley's worldview. Previously, when she learned that the spellcasting level of the Moon Empire was backward, it had already been a huge blow to her. Now, if she did it again, her favorable impression of the Moon Empire would be greatly reduced. The value of elves lies in their influence on plants and the potential for evolution. Human greed should not be built on the blood of elves. List immediately made a decision. Kenley, immediately go back and issue a ban. All wizards are absolutely not allowed to use research as an excuse to kill any elf. Kenley accepted the order. Yes, Your Highness. After she left, List spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Although he felt heartache for the tragic death of the sprite worms, his purpose in banning the killing of elves was to prevent wizards from researching magic power dust and thereby cultivate more wizards. This was already the era of the night. It was better for wizards to quietly withdraw from the stage of history. Leaning against the back of the chair, he suddenly thought of the Moon Empire under the rule of wizards. What kind of country is that, and how do wizards rule the world? The scepter of time was handed over to Achi for research. However, Achi only had a simple look at the time gemstone before putting the scepter aside. Her Magic Gate project had already progressed to a critical juncture. She did not even have the time to cultivate, let alone divide her attention to research other things. So far, her super spells had stopped at 4. The chainsaw super high pressure water knife, the spiral super high pressure water drill, the centrifugal water shield, and the magic eye. She had yet to perfectly master the ice elemental incarnation and could not switch to the new elemental incarnation. Although it would take some time before the magic gate could be used in theory, Achi still gave List a huge surprise. Brother, this is a magic equipment specially made by Achi in response to Bard's tendency to get lost in the world beyond the material world. Its function is to locate the coordinates of the material space. As long as he remembers these coordinates, even if Bard gets lost, he can still find his way back. She handed over a string of something similar to a crystal pendant. With a glance, List knew what the magic equipment was made of, the invisible dragon's scales. He did not know when, but Bard had unexpectedly given Achi a lot of its scales. For a dragon, scales were very important, more important than the gems it produced. One man and one dragon were so familiar with each other, yet Bard was not even willing to give a space gem to List. Instead, he gave the even more precious scales to Achi. Had List not been a cheerful person, He would have been angered to death by such a treatment. Forget it, there is no difference between giving it to a chi and giving it to me. I don't care about it. Calming himself down from wanting to beat up the invisible dragon, List took the magic equipment. He opened his mouth and asked, "A chi, what is the name of this equipment?" "Node locator." "Oh." List did not say anything more. He felt that a chi's ability to name things did not inherit his elegant style and was too straightforward. So how is Bard going to use it? It's for brother. After brother and Bard become one with the dragon, by operating the crystal white trajectory, you can activate the node locator and leave a location for the material boundary you pass through. When you can't find a node to pass back to the material world, you can activate it again and find the node you came from. Such a string of crystal pendants was obviously a piece of equipment for human use. List nodded lightly, understood. In other words, now Bard and I can break through the material boundary at will and fly to the world beyond the material world? Chapter 844. Ever since it crossed the material boundary for the first time and almost got lost inside, the invisible dragon no longer dared to fly at high speed, fearing that it would accidentally fly into the world outside the material boundary and get lost inside, unable to extricate itself. The world outside the material boundary was something the invisible dragon could not understand at present. After all, it was just an immature invisible dragon, and its ability to control space was like a child holding a kitchen knife. Although the kitchen knife was very sharp, it was very likely to cut itself. Now that he had the node locator, the danger of getting lost was undoubtedly eliminated. After List figured out the usage of this magic equipment, he communicated with the invisible dragon Bard. This slender, graceful and crystal-like dragon was very excited. It unexpectedly spat out 2 space gems that had just been condensed from space magic towards List's palm. Wuxia. The glittering, fingernail-sized gem had a spherical space with a diameter of 5 meters. At least it knows how to be grateful, much better than that white-eyed dragon Leo. List was pleased with himself, and the small emotion he felt because the invisible dragon was closer to a chi disappeared. He directly gave one of the 2 space gems to a chi. You often need to prepare a large number of experimental materials, and it is inconvenient to carry without a space gem. Take this one. Leaving one for himself, he had 4 space rings, which were almost enough to meet his daily needs. 2 space gems were enough for a chi. As a siren, she ate very little, and a wizard did not need a lot of resources for cultivation. List, on the other hand, couldn't do it. He needed to carry too many items on a daily basis. Just his personal cultivation resources took up the space of 2 space gems, so 4 was barely enough. Naturally. With the existence of the invisible dragon, there would only be more space rings than he could wear in the future, so there was no need to worry about having enough. It didn't take long for List to decide to try to cross the material boundary. The method of crossing was very simple. This was the invisible dragon's instinctive power, and it only needed to fly at full speed. Therefore, after the human and dragon became one, magic power and chi fused, quickly combining into a whole. With a flap of its wings, it quickly entered the material boundary and flew back and forth. Wuxia. When the invisible dragon reached its fastest speed, it seemed to be constantly flickering, and each flicker could reach a place hundreds of meters away. A little faster, Bard? Wuxia. He sped up again and again. The colorful world of magic power that Crystal White Orbit saw was like a moving picture frame by frame. The node locator on List's chest buzzed. It was the invisible dragon's scales engraved with magic runes operating, emitting a unique magic beacon. Boom. Suddenly, Crystal White Orbit's field of vision shook, and the scene suddenly changed. The node locator only felt a tremble, but there was no longer a buzzing sound. He and the invisible dragon had already arrived at a boundless, lightless and soundless space, seemingly shielded from all senses. However, he could also feel that this space was made of crystal structures. No matter how the man and the dragon flew, there was no target to pursue. Wuxia. The invisible dragon issued a hurried cry. It felt that it was lost again. However, List was already mentally prepared. He operated the node locator on his chest. Immediately, a light flickered on the left side of the invisible dragon. Bard, it's working. That's the material boundary we came through. Wuxia. Don't worry, the perception is very clear. Don't worry about getting lost. Let's look around here and see if we can find a node we can cross. With List acting as the backbone, Bard no longer panicked and flew peacefully in the world outside the material world. Crystal White Orbit was still operating. Although the surroundings were pitch black and lightless, List still patiently searched for any unusual traces. He had seen these scenes in Bard's memories, and he had also discussed them in detail with Ichi, so he knew how to deal with them. Bard, search with your heart. Your perception of space is an innate ability. As long as you calm down and search, you will definitely be able to find a weak material boundary. Wuxia. Bard, who was connected to List's mind, understood. Under List's guidance, it began to calm down and respond. Then it slightly flapped its wings, and circles of special space magic power radiated outward like ripples on water. After a short moment, the surrounding space returned to the radiation of space magic power. Just like a bat's ultrasonic positioning, the invisible dragon could actually use its own space magic power to locate and search. This skill should be written in the List Dragon Knight Cultivation Manual and become the invisible dragon's 8th skill, magic positioning. In such a serious scene, he still had the leisure to be absent-minded and add new articles to the invisible dragon's information. Previously, the fire dragon had 7 skills: demonic dragon energy refinement, dragon breath tempering, dragon power focus, dragon heart code, dragon blood infection, dragon night resonance, and dragon eye track. Now the invisible dragon had 8 skills: white eye track, material boundary, invisibility, dragon power focus, dragon heart code, dragon blood infection, dragon breath shattering, space shuttle, and magic positioning. These were skills outside of the dragon battle technique, and belonged to the excavation of the dragon's innate talent. Some were abilities unique to different dragons, such as the fire dragon's demonic dragon energy refinement, dragon breath tempering, and elemental transformation, while the invisible dragon's dragon breath shattering, material boundary, space shuttle, and so on. Some were abilities common to all dragons, such as dragon power focus, dragon heart code, dragon blood infection, and slightly different white eye track and dragon eye track. The summary might not be comprehensive, mainly because List had been very busy recently, and the List Dragon Knight Cultivation Manual had not been updated for a long time. Thoughts flashed through his mind. He continued to control Bard to carry out magic positioning in the world outside the material world. In this special space, he couldn't sense the passage of time, and staying here for a long time would make him feel a little panicky. Fortunately, the node locator at the transmigration entrance was still emitting a response. Suddenly, magic positioning sent a trace of a different sign. One man and one dragon were immediately startled and flew at full speed toward the place where the abnormality was coming from, arriving there in the blink of an eye. Bard operated spatial magic power with all his strength and suddenly attacked the abnormal location. In an instant, the field of view of the white eye track changed once again. They had already arrived at a distorted, long tube space. This space lay across the huge weave, connecting the border of 2 material spaces. It was the Great Maelstrom Magical Transmission Array that List was already very familiar with. I actually came back here. He wanted to laugh awkwardly, but he held back. He only took a deep look at the weave that stretched out into the pitch-black darkness. The invisible dragon wasn't mature enough to break through the critical point, and he still couldn't see the true body of the weave dragon. Immediately after, he flew in the opposite direction to the other end of the wormhole space, which was the huge sea whirlpool of the Whirlpool Islands. The wormhole space was originally a one-way transmission array, and there would be a huge repulsive force that would push all objects to the entrance of the Whirlpool Mountains. But this was ineffective against the invisible dragon. It cheered and flapped its wings a few times, arriving at the entrance of the wormhole. With another fierce struggle, it flew out of the wormhole space. The rumbling sound of flowing water reached their ears, and there was a misty mist before their eyes. The moist air caressed their faces, and in the blink of an eye, they rushed out of the mist. List and Bard were at the entrance of the deep whirlpool well. One man and one dragon had successfully completed a spatial transmigration from the world outside the material world. He looked at the swirling funnel-shaped sea and the azure sky. Chapter 845. It was List's first time traveling to a world outside of the material world. He had a lot to learn. He did not stay in the Maelstrom for long. He flew directly to the nearby Maelstrom Island. Due to the lack of resources from the Flame Territory, the development of Maelstrom Town was very difficult. So far it was only a small town. The total population of magicians who built mage towers here was less than 2,000. Therefore they could only maintain a small town by the sea. They did not dare to explore the depths of the forest, where the powerful World of Warcraft was entrenched. A night team in Maelstrom Town had encountered a group of split-legged lizards. This was a middle-level Earth-type World of Warcraft that was very suitable for the whole family to ride. List had caught one in the Burning Mountain. He wanted to give it to the oxtail marquis as a mount, but the split-legged lizard ran away. When I have time, I'll catch all the split-legged lizards here and see if I can raise them artificially. It should be very comfortable to raise them as a means of transportation. Many ships were anchored at the port of Maelstrom Town. Apart from ships flying the flame flag, there were also ships of the Tulip family flying the red tulip flag. After Marquis Merlin's funeral, the Tulip family began to organize knight and serfs to prepare for the great voyage to develop Tulip Island. Currently, a group of explorers had already landed on Tulip Island, but List did not pay attention to them. Maelstrom Town on the Maelstrom Islands was a supply point during the voyage. The explorers would conduct large-scale hunts here to replenish their food and water. In addition, Greenlight Town on the Midway Island, Moonlight Town on the first island Crescent Island, and Red Tree Town on the first island of the 3 islands were all supply points for fleets. Unfortunately, during the 3,000-kilometer voyage from the Maelstrom Islands to the Flame Islands, there were no other islands that could provide supplies. Circling above Maelstrom Town for a while, List did not alarm the guards here. He thought about it and decided not to stay here. He went north to the Midway Island to bring the light emerald gem dragon Isin to Flame Island. In the future, the dragon nest of the light green gemstone dragon would definitely be placed on Flame Island. Hence, not a single trace of its aura could be missed. It had to be kept on Flame Island to produce gemstones. Considering the time, the Sapphire clan should already know that the light green gem dragon has fallen into my hands. In this case, I probably don't need to keep it a secret anymore. I can directly use the Sapphire clan's channels to sell off the batch of light green gems excavated from the mined island. Even with the support of trade income from sea salt, white paper and glass, the Flame territory was gradually finding it difficult to maintain the development of the Flame Island. The resources that the territory had accumulated over the past 3 to 4 years were about to be depleted, and the Flame Island had yet to produce anything. Coupled with the astronomical amount of magic materials Chi had spent to develop the magic school, List, who had originally thought that it was easy to earn money, was gradually running out of money. Indeed, sea salt, glass and white paper were all profit-making industries. Monopolizing the technology would earn them money like flowing water. However, the purchase of serfs, potions, food, metals, jade, magic materials and other expenses were also spent like water. Relying on trade to make money is really slow. I'd better find a chance to rob the Eagle Kingdom. His heart began to stir again. It would be a waste not to fight for resources with 3 dragons. It was already night when Bart arrived at the Midway Island. He sensed the position of the light emerald gem dragon Ethan and flew there directly. Thus, under the hazy moonlight, Bart and Ethan met for the first time. Bart still had that disdainful look on his face. Whether it was the fire dragon Leo or the light emerald gem dragon Ethan, he did not show any malice. However, the pride of a dragon made it impossible for him to show kindness to other dragons. In his inner world, only he was the most honorable existence. Strictly speaking, List and Chi were existences that he recognized. Strictly speaking, List could only achieve half a recognition. Ethan could not see the invisible dragon that had deliberately hidden itself, but the connection between dragons allowed him to clearly sense Bart's existence. He was an adult dragon that had seen many storms. When he was in the Eagle Kingdom, he had dealt with many dragons. Thus, he also maintained an attitude of not seeing Bart as if he did not see Bart, and indeed he did not see him. Ethan, the environment of the Midway Island is too narrow for you to live in. I have already found an infinitely large island that has enough space for you to travel. As for the dragon nest that you want, I will slowly build it in the near future. There will be bone-burning wine, magic potions and jade. Ethan agreed to List's request to migrate. In fact, he did not like the environment of the Midway Island. He could fly from one end of the island to the other with a single push, and he had to hide from the ant-like humans in Greenlight Town. Although he was a defeated and captured dragon, he still had to enjoy the basic rights of a dragon. At night, the 2 dragons rested a few kilometers apart. List chose to sleep on the light emerald gem dragon. He had not been close to Ethan for a long time. The autumn wind was cool. He did not know the latitude of this place, but the temperature was dropping day by day. With a blanket made of green silk draped over his body, he began to examine the dimensional jump with Bard. Looking at the current situation, it's very easy for Bard to enter the world beyond the material world from the material world. However, it is very difficult to find the way back from the material world. Recalling the silent, lightless, boundless, and special claustrophobic feeling of the world outside the material world, Even if he only stayed for a moment while riding the dragon, he still felt suffocated. One could imagine how frightened Bart was when he first got lost in the world outside the material world. No wonder after flying out, he immediately wanted to find someone to ride him, increase his courage and help him not get lost. Even after Liszt failed to ride the dragon for the first time and Achi refused because of the language barrier, he still lowered his requirements and let Liszt ride the dragon successfully for the second time. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the smoke mission. Is this the power of fate? It always gives a push at the most unexpected place. Even a sacred dragon like the invisible dragon can't escape the arrangement of fate. It's scary. Fortunately, the person who grasps the power of fate is me. His thoughts were interrupted and he quickly returned to his original thoughts. He continued to ponder, the world outside the material world is very special. It is easy to confuse perception and cognition, so it is very difficult to find the exit. Using magic locator means, I can only find places with abnormalities at the material boundary. Does this mean that even the invisible dragon cannot pass through any space at will? If he could not find the material boundary, no matter how the invisible dragon tossed and turned, it would be of no use. Unless he used a node locator to locate it. I wonder if I can find the location again after locating it? Liszt thought of a situation. By using the invisible dragon to locate in different locations, he could form a transmission network exclusive to the invisible dragon, which could freely shuttle to any location with a signal. For example, he could fly to the palace treasury of the Eagle Kingdom, and then travel through time and space to return to Blazing Island. Then, he could use the shuttle between the two nodes to continuously transport the resources of the Eagle Kingdom's treasury to Blazing Island. In this way, getting rich suddenly would not be a dream. Unfortunately, this idea was shattered by the shuttle operation he started early the next morning. When he and the invisible dragon flew into the world outside the material world, they found that there was no beacon left behind yesterday except for the beacon behind them. After a little thought, he understood the reason. Achi left a special magic array on the node locator which is connected to the material world. When it enters the world outside the material world, the magic array still maintains its connection to the material world and acts as a signal. But when he returned to the material world, the location of the magic array rapidly changed. Thus, the original coordinates disappeared. Chapter 846. After sending the emerald dragon Ethan to the Blazing Island and finding a suitable dragon nest for Ethan on a mountain in the Blazing Mountain Range, Liszt bade farewell to his worldly affairs. In the following days he traveled with Bard to the material world and the world outside of it. He collected a large amount of information and handed it to Achi so that she could continuously improve the design of new magic gates. One day in mid-October, he and Bard flew into the world outside of the material world as usual, aimlessly searching for any new abnormalities. Up until now, apart from the wormhole space of the Great Maelstrom, no abnormalities had appeared. The world outside of the material world was like a pool of stagnant water. After several days without any discoveries, Liszt couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. But at this time, the invisible dragon used magic recovery and finally found a new abnormality outside the abnormal point of the Great Maelstrom. Wuxia. Bard suddenly became excited. One man and one dragon quickly flew toward the abnormality. They roused spatial magic power and broke through the material boundary. They directly traveled out of the abnormality. Rumble. Their field of vision suddenly opened up, and they arrived in a strange space. This space seemed to be formed by countless shattered mirrors, but in the crystal white trajectory, each mirror crack was a trace left behind after the magic net was torn. Bard's wing only touched a crack slightly, and he let out a miserable shriek. Wuxia. An intense tearing pain appeared in both his and Liszt's hearts at the same time. When he quickly retracted his wing, Liszt discovered that a crack as long as an adult's arm had appeared on the invisible dragon's left wing. Transparent blood flowed out, and spatial magic power continuously dissipated in this strange space. Be careful, Bard, something is wrong here. Liszt endured the pain and guided the invisible dragon, carefully avoiding every crack. Layers upon layers of strange cracks shattered the entire space. One man and one dragon had to advance cautiously. Fortunately, dragons had powerful recovery abilities, and their wounds had already started to scab. Liszt took out a few magic potions and swallowed them to replenish the magic power he and the invisible dragon had consumed. The magic potions turned into pure magic power that stirred up the dragon's fighting aura, and then through the Dragon Knight's resonance, it was instilled into the invisible dragon. Since the magic power wasn't compatible, there was a large amount of consumption, but it was still somewhat beneficial. Only by fusing his warrior energy and magic energy with little fire dragon Leo wouldn't consume too much energy. It's over there. The exit of the material boundary is over there. List kept using the crystal white orbit to scan the crack. Finally he found the material boundary. Wuxia. The invisible dragon pointed at another exit. At the place where it was pointing, there was also a strange boundary that looked like a material boundary. List looked carefully and felt that this exit was likely to lead to a different material world. He had intended to go in and explore, but the dense cracks in the surroundings prevented him from passing through. He could only obediently return to the familiar material world. Woohoo! Woohoo! After returning to the material world, he immediately felt a gust of wind. He and the invisible dragon were in the middle of two towering mountains. This place seemed to be a vent. The strong wind constantly whistled past Bard's body, almost blowing him over. After leaving the air vent, he carefully sized up the place. He discovered that the mountains weren't very tall, but because they were very close, they formed an hourglass-shaped valley. The wind just happened to pass through the thinnest part of the hourglass valley, rapidly compressing and accelerating, producing violent gales. However, this wasn't a naturally formed environment, but an artificially excavated valley. The mountains on both sides had very obvious traces of chiseling with knives and axes, as if they were the masterpiece of a giant hacking. Strange, they are actually man-made carvings. The carvings on the mountains are very rough, somewhat similar to the effects of a super magic released by a chi. Could this be a masterpiece left behind by an ancient wizard? He suddenly urged Bard to fly high into the sky and look down from a height of 5,000 meters. He immediately discovered that he had passed by this mountain range when he was mapping. It was located on a great plain in the center of Flame Island. It was a long mountain range that couldn't be considered eye-catching, and the Hourglass Valley was at the center of the mountain range. Because of the trees blocking it, it was impossible to see the Hourglass Valley from a distance without looking carefully. There's a situation. List was overjoyed. He loved this kind of adventure the most. He didn't know what position Flame Island had played in the ancient war, but a large number of masters had definitely left traces on this island. The treasures they left behind might be divine artifacts like the Scepter of Time. He swooped down and returned to the Hourglass Valley. Activating the crystal white track, he could see the center of the Hourglass Valley, faintly revealing traces of magic. This special vent was connected to the broken crack space. List didn't intend to enter recklessly for now. Those cracks were too dangerous. He searched down the mountain and soon found that there was a huge native tribe of Moonkiller people living at the foot of the mountain. These natives were holding some kind of ceremony in an open space at the foot of the mountain. When List approached, he found that they were kneeling in front of 6 huge broken statues. Only one of the statues was intact. It was more than 20 meters tall, and it was the carving of a wizard wearing a magic cloak and holding a slender stone broken sword in his hand. I wonder if there is a divine artifact sealed inside? A thought suddenly flashed through List's mind. Immediately after, he saw a group of ancient wizards on the open space. They were holding wooden trays high and approaching the statues. An ancient wizard, presumably a listener, was activating a huge brazier with blue flames in front of the statues. It seemed that they were going to pour the contents of the trays into the brazier with blue flames. How dare you! After seeing the contents of the trays, List was immediately enraged. His and Bard's Dragon Knight forms emerged from the material boundary. Dragon might spread unscrupulously, like an invisible wave impact. The tens of thousands of Moonkiller people on the open space were pressed to the ground by the powerful pressure. The ancient magicians were also pressed to the ground, unable to breathe. The trays in their hands fell to the ground one after another, issuing cries of goo goo, woo wah, and goo loo. Impressively, they were a group of lesser sprites, a group of sprite worms as well as the largest sprite, which was making multiple cries. They were all tied to the trays and could not move. However, their eyes were fixed on the invisible Dragon Knight descending from the sky. Fear, surprise, and other emotions flashed in the eyes of these little creatures. Wuxia. The invisible dragon landed on the ground and directly swept away a half-collapsed statue. Stepping on the pedestal, it faced the sky and roared. Amidst its roar, List jumped off the dragon's back, drew out the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, and slowly walked toward the ancient wizards. The silver-white armor, the bright red cloak, the blue greatsword, and the light golden short hair were the most noble and unparalleled aura of a strong master. The light that was blossoming almost blinded the ancient sorcerers who raised their heads. Cassador. Mazairos. The tribal listener's magic power was vigorous, roughly at the level of a peak great wizard. Resisting the pressure of dragon might, it shouted and tried to stand up. List stirred up a new wave of dragon might and charged forward. Boom. The listener collapsed again. The other ancient wizards were also trembling with fear, not knowing what to do. The might of the dragon knight was so terrifying. It shocked everyone with its own strength, making the moon killer people who had never come into contact with dragon might unable to resist. List walked past the kneeling ancient wizards to the side of the greater sprite, stretched out his finger, and smeared a bit of jade powder on it, motioning the greater sprite to bite it. "You're safe. Ongchi crunchy." The greater sprite spat out a string of unintelligible bird language. Seeing this, List directly knocked on its head. Immediately, its upper teeth bit down, and the skin on List's finger was broken. The contract was completed in an instant. Chapter 847. Ongchi? The big elf was a little confused. Its body was a translucent grayish-yellow, and there was a small plant on its head. There were small white flowers on it, and there was a small oval fruit at its root. It looked like a potato. List used the telepathic contract to verify the sprite's thought process and understood what kind of sprite it was. Indeed, as he saw, it was a sprite born from a potato-like plant. If he was not mistaken, the plants it affected were very similar to the potatoes on Earth, which produced spherical tubers underground, commonly known as potatoes. This was a potato sprite. If the potatoes it produced also had the advantages of the potatoes on Earth, such as high yield, rich nutrition, and strong environmental adaptability, then it would definitely be an important source of food. The most important types of sprites were potions and grains, and the potato sprite had great potential. "Little guy, you are safe now. From now on, follow me and enjoy life as an elf." List sent a gentle thought to it. After the potato sprite sensed it, it nodded unconsciously. The rope broke and the potato sprite flew onto List's shoulder. It laughed freely, "Haha ongchi crunchy." Immediately after, List began to contract lesser sprites and sprite worms. There were not many sprites, 8 lesser sprites and 16 sprite worms. He contracted them one by one and then gathered them around him. When these sprites were captured by the moon killers, they took back their worm stalks but did not contract them. According to the research of the Magic Guild, the moon killers believed that once the contract was completed, the sprite worms would extract their blood essence. Some ancient wizards even called lesser sprites freaks, believing that it was an inauspicious sign. As for greater sprites, most of the moon killers had never seen one in their lives. Just when he contracted the sprite, a group of ancient wizards who had adapted to the invisible dragon's might began to get up from the ground, raised their hands and wanted to release magic to attack List. Cassador. Mozairos, however, before the ancient mage could cast a spell, List had already turned around and slashed at the air with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword. A particularly large fiery red sword aura flew out. In the blink of an eye, the sword ray had already crossed 10 meters and split an ancient mage in half. There was no blood, only the smell of barbecued meat. Twisting his body, List slashed out with another fiery red sword ray. Another ancient magician was cleaved in half by List, and the smell of roasted meat wafted from the charred body. After 7 or 8 sword strikes, the 7 or 8 ancient magicians were reduced to 15 or 16 ancient magicians with only half of their bodies lying on the ground. He had killed the ancient magicians one after another, and he had done so with such ease. All the ancient sorcerers, as well as some strong warriors who were trying their best to resist the Firebird, were quickly intimidated by the Firebird. The fiery red sword aura destroyed their courage that had been scared out of their wits by the Firebird. Seeing this, List took out a notebook from his space ring. Opening the notebook, he saw handwritten translations of the language of the moon, serpentines. Each language had a special serpentine phonetic symbol, and some commonly used serpentines were also translated into the language of the moon and marked with phonetic symbols. He quickly found the content he wanted and then compared it with the serpentine phonetic symbols and read it aloud, "Soft, oh big." The meaning of this sentence was, "Surrender or die." The Moonkiller natives trembled in the Firebird, and no one responded to List's threat. The listener, who had been hit by the Firebird twice, had sobered up again. He pointed at List and shouted, "Cassador." Mozairos. Immediately after him, 2 more ancient mages pointed at List, "Cassador." Mozairos. They were still secretly condensing magic power, wanting to release magic to attack List. But List operated the magic eyes at any time, and with 2 particularly large fiery red swords, he killed the 2 ancient mages. Seeing the elves being killed by these natives, a lot of hostility had accumulated in his heart, and he needed to kill people to vent it. Only the listener was not killed. Instead, List walked to his side and slapped him in the face with the blade of the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, sending several teeth flying and half of his old face swollen like a buttocks. Then he opened the notebook again, trying to translate what Casador and Mozairos meant. Unfortunately, after searching for a while, he could not find the corresponding language of the moon. In a fit of anger, he shouted again, "Soft, oh big." After a moment of silence, an ancient mage finally took the lead and knelt on the ground shouting, "Soft, oh big." This was the meaning of surrender. With this ancient mage taking the lead, the remaining 70 or so ancient mages followed one by one shouting, "Soft, oh big." But the listener and the remaining 17 ancient mages still shouted fiercely, "Casador, Mozairos." The result was that List slashed 3 more ancient mages to death with his sword, and then threw a piece of rope to the ancient mage who took the lead in surrendering, signaling him to tie up the listener and the 14 stubborn ancient mages. They were tied together and then tied into a dead knot. The rope woven with hemp rope was unbreakable. Without resistance, the entire Moonkiller tribe, under the loud shouts of the ancient mages, quickly surrendered to List. All the natives knelt down and kowtowed to him, "Soft, oh big." List looked at the dense crowd of Moonkiller tribe, which was a large tribe of about 10 or 20,000 people, and there were more than 100 ancient mages alone. He walked in front of the first ancient mage who surrendered, pointed at him, opened the notebook and said, "Lesna." This was the meaning of the listener. Hearing this, the ancient mage was immediately overjoyed, crawled to the feet of List, and kept kissing the tip of his silver-white metal boots. List pointed to the dense crowd of Moonkiller tribe natives below, signaling the new listener to forbid them from capturing elves. Anyone who dared to kill elves would be directly executed. Then he signaled the listener to dismiss the Moonkiller tribe, not to surround here and to continue working. He had no feelings for the Moonkiller tribe's surrender, he just wanted to capture these people and make them serfs. In this way the ancient mages were killed and the elves were contracted. List began to study the broken statues worshipped by the Moonkiller tribe. Of the 6 broken statues, only 1 was intact and the other 5 were broken into pieces. One of them was originally half intact, but it was trampled to pieces by the invisible dragon. As for the statue holding a weapon, the 5 broken statues had lost this part, and the only intact statue still had half a stone sword. List suddenly jumped onto the arm of the statue holding the sword, infused the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword with dragon fighting energy, and slashed at the statue's wrist. Suddenly the wrist was broken. The stone sword sculpture fell to the ground and broke into several pieces. One of the pieces suddenly bloomed with a brilliant light of mana retroaction. List confirmed his guess. The stone scepter that sealed the scepter of time originated from one of the parts of this batch of sculptures. Chapter 848. The body of the sword was simple and the craftsmanship was not very advanced, but the material was very special, like some kind of metal alloy, but it must have been mixed with different magic materials. The hilt was the most special part and also the part with the richest magic power. Moreover, List observed with the eyes of magic that there were 8 different kinds of magic blooming on it: water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, ice and darkness, all of which were supreme magic level. Among them was a magic he was very familiar with, Fire Dragon Supreme Magic. All these supreme magic were engraved on the spiral stripes on the hilt, and each stripe represented a color: blue, red, yellow, cyan, purple, white, light blue and black. In other words, this sword has 8 attributes, and all of them are supreme magic attributes? List tried to use his fire attribute dragon's fighting energy and clearly felt that the sword's increase in fighting energy had reached an exaggerated level, far exceeding his current sword, the ice dragon slaying sword, which did not match his current attributes. He used his fighting skill in the air, and with a burning red cloud, almost half the sky was burned. The group of ancient mages was so scared that they trembled. Their most powerful magic move was not as powerful as a casual blow from List. It feels good, but it's a pity that it's not a knight sword, so it's not suitable for slashing and other moves. This is probably a sword-shaped magic staff used to increase the power of a mage's casting. The ancient magic shooters are really full of tricks. To make this sword, I'm afraid I need to extract the supreme magic of 8 kinds of elemental dragons. From this, it could be seen that the ancient magic shooters still had a very high degree of use for dragons. At least they could collect all kinds of evil dragons at will. Although it's a magic sword, it's barely enough for me to use. I don't know what your name is in the hands of the magic shooters, but since you've followed me, you should have a more resounding name. I'll give you the name 8 Dragons Divine Sword. With a thought, List stored the 8 Dragons' divine sword in his space ring. It was not a product of the Holy Dragon, so the 8 Dragons' divine sword could not resist the gem space's absorption. Finding the 8 Dragons' divine sword, then the weapons of the remaining 5 statues, to be precise the weapons of 4 statues, one of which should be the Scepter of Time, were naturally more desirable. Unfortunately, after searching several times, he could not find the broken parts of the weapons of these statues. He walked back to the listener and flipped open the notebook, but he could not find a suitable translation. He gestured with sign language, first to the statue, then to the 8 Dragons' divine sword, and finally to the arm, asking the listener about the whereabouts of the other arm parts. The listener was not stupid. He quickly understood what List meant. List understood what he meant. After the statue was broken, many parts of it were taken away by other tribes to be worshipped. This was reasonable. The treasures left by the ancestors, that the Horn tribe worshipped probably did not refer to the Scepter of Time, but included the stone statues of the Scepter of Time. For the moon-killing people, the 6 statues here should be the ancestors they mentioned. When the statues shattered, the moon-killer tribe also began to split up, so some of the larger tribes took some of the stone statues back to their settlements to worship. So, to find the other parts of these statues, we still need to search all the Moonslayer tribes. It's too complicated, so I'll leave this task to Orders of Chivalry. The distribution of the moon-killing people was too wide. If List wanted to search them one by one, it would be time-consuming and exhausting. It was better to let Orders of Chivalry complete it. Anyway, everything on the fiery island belonged to him, and no one could hide it from him. These ancient artifacts would eventually fall into his hands. So, he looked at the new listener of the sacred tribe who called himself Sasyamite, or Su for short. Su, there are 6 statues of the ancestors of the Killing Moon people standing in these ruins. So, the mountain behind them is the Sacred Mountain? The Sacred Mountain. Su nodded excitedly. While speaking the language of the moon, he gestured. The ancestors and the dragon fought side by side. The Sacred Mountain is the eternal paradise built by the ancestors and the dragon. The moon-killing people guard the Sacred Mountain and the entrance to the eternal paradise. As he spoke, he pointed at the Hourglass Valley, his eyes revealing extreme piety. At this time, an ancient sorcerer suddenly pointed at the invisible dragon that appeared behind List and shouted, "Biglised." This language of the moon, List could understand it. Biglised meant the dragon. The moon-killing people had never seen a dragon, but they had heard the legend of their ancestors fighting side by side with the dragon. Sensing the powerful dragon might of the invisible dragon Bard, an ancient sorcerer finally connected it with the dragon. The listener also looked at Bard excitedly, but he carefully asked List, "Biglised?" "That's right." List gestured for Bard to lean his head against his hand. He wanted to see the reaction of the ancient sorcerers. "Biglised, my battle partner." "Confirmed." Led by Su, the ancient sorcerers immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Seiki." "Biglised." "Bigrid." Seiki was a saint, and Bigrid was a dragon. They had already put List on the same level as their ancestors. Their ancestors were all Seiki in their mouths. They were saints who slept on the Sacred Mountain and were guarded by the sacred tribe. And List was a living saint. With a living dragon as a battle partner, he made them surrender from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, this speech was half true and half false. It was probably more of the ancient sorcerers flattering List and whitewashing their rapidly defecting moral integrity. Looking at the ancient sorcerers trying their best to show their loyalty and devotion. A faint smile hung on the corner of List's mouth. He was not enjoying the flattery, but he knew that he had accidentally completed the smoke mission, finding the Sacred Mountain and understanding a bit of the secret of the ancient sorcerers. Mission completed. Reward, the entrance to the ruins. He knew that the entrance to the ruins was the wind of the Hourglass Valley behind him. There was a broken space there. One of them was the material boundary that led to this location, and the other should be the entrance to the eternal paradise that the moon-killing people talked about, which was the entrance to the ruins. However, the entrance to the ruins was blocked by countless cracks, and it was temporarily impossible to explore it. Mission: the Sacred Mountain acted quickly and nimbly. You saved many beautiful elves. The elves born on the Fiery Island finally welcomed their savior. As the master of the Fiery Island, all the elves belong to you. Please take care of the Big Potato Sprite and the other elves. Reward: the discovery of a new archipelago. Oh, the discovery of a new archipelago. The 3 exploration fleets, including Yevich, have been exploring in the direction of the mainland. I thought that they would directly find the legendary continent next to the Fiery Islands. I didn't expect that they might find a new archipelago. Could it be a big archipelago? Currently, the exploration fleets had not stopped their mission and were still continuously exploring new islands. Therefore, the mission reward would probably fall on the exploration fleets. He pulled his thoughts back to reality. After settling the matters here, it was time to choose to leave. Protect the statue ruins Su. After leaving his last order, he rode on the invisible dragon Bard and took the elves away in a box. He flipped open his notebook and found what he wanted to say. When Bard rose into the sky, all the ancient sorcerers heard the majestic voice of Liszt with the help of the invisible dragon's magic, a y-o calm goose gold. The meaning of this sentence was. Chapter 849. Liszt was holding the sprite, while the invisible dragon's claws were still holding the tied-up former listeners and the 14 stubborn ancient wizards. Therefore he did not use spatial shuttle and instead just wandered around the material boundary. Whenever he needed to rest, he would carefully look at the sprites one by one. Before the 16 sprite worms spat out their worm stalks, it was temporarily impossible to distinguish their species. The potato sprite did not need to distinguish itself. As for the remaining 8 sprites, Liszt carefully looked at their heads and communicated with them to determine their species. Among them, 5 sprites were still unidentifiable, while the other 3 sprites were basically identifiable. The first sprite was very easy to recognize as it had a small gourd on its head. Impressively, it was a gourd sprite that had never appeared before. The second sprite was also very easy to recognize as it had a string of small alternating green and red fruits on its head. These fruits were coffee trees, an important cash crop in the forests of Blazing Island. Coffee was a very popular beverage among aristocrats. However, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not produce coffee trees and could only import them from the continent. However, there were many coffee trees in the forests of Blazing Island. Collecting coffee trees' fruits and coffee beans would become an important industry. The value of this coffee sprite was not low. The third sprite took Liszt a lot of effort. It had a small sapling with a huge root on its head. Root was a prominent feature of trees in rainy and sultry forests. Many trees had a wing-like structure extending from the base of their trunks, resembling a wall of planks, and were called root. Because several kinds of trees had root, Liszt held the sprite's head and looked at it for a while. Only then did he determine that it was a 4-wood sprite. 4-wood sprites were common trees in forests and belonged to the top of the forest. Their tall canopies were often located at the highest point of the forest and were the habitat of a large number of birds and monkeys. However, apart from being used as wood, the tree itself had no special value. Moreover, as wood, it could not compare to ironwood quality trees such as rockwood and stone wood. But in any case, for Liszt, the existence of magical creatures like sprites was valuable in itself. There was no need to desire them to bring more value. Gallop, gallop. The potato sprite crawled out of the box and looked at Liszt curiously. It had been looking at Liszt the whole time. At the level of a great elf, the power of the contract was no longer a one-sided suppression. Great elves had sufficient independent thinking. However, since Liszt had saved it, coupled with the familiar feeling, the potato sprite quite liked Liszt. It was just curious as to why it liked Liszt. Liszt looked almost the same as those terrifying moonslayers, just a little prettier. My name is Liszt Flame. Hang chi, come repeat after me Liszt. Lizi. That's right, just say it like this Liszt. Flame. Ong chi Liszt. Flame? Very good. You already know my name. What about yours? I forgot. You don't have a name, so I'll give you one. Seeing the potato on your head reminds me of a bomb. Why don't you call yourself Kutch, the heroic grenadier in League of Legends? A name was just a code. The potato sprite did not understand the concept of a name, so it accepted its name in a daze. Kutch. Ongchi Kutch. Yes, Kutch. Aha, Ongchi Kutch. The potato sprite giggled. Liszt looked at it and began to think about how to plant potatoes and make them the staple food of the Flame Territory's immigrants in the future. The birth of a new food always required an acceptance process. However, the popularization of potatoes should be quick. Even if the Flame Territory's immigrants did not like it, they could still give it to the Moonslayers. As long as the planting of potatoes was promoted on a large scale, the food problem would no longer bother Flame Island. After returning to the Infernal Plains, he handed the listeners and the ancient magicians over to the Guild of Magic. Interrogate them harshly. These are the listeners of the Holy Tribe and a group of loyal ancient magicians. I want to find out everything they know, especially what Casido and Mozairos mean. Yes, Your Highness. Also, organize a group of magicians in charge of species identification to help me identify the species of the sprite. The interrogation took time, but before dinner, List already knew what Casido and Mozairos meant. Casido referred to barbarians, while Mozairos referred to evil forces that desecrate magic. According to the listener whose teeth had been pulled out, the barbarians had betrayed their ancestors and used evil forces to desecrate the great magic. Why does it sound like the barbarians are talking about the night? List felt that it sounded like it. There were a lot of night in the era of the Moon Empire. The knight probably belonged to the magician's squire class, a kind of guard. For example, the moon language of Mount Mulligaudin meant the guardian knight of moonlight. It could be seen that the knight was just a guard in the era of the Moon Empire. Perhaps to the magicians who worshipped the truth, the knight who relied on physical strength was indeed a barbarian. And the barbarian knight really overthrew the Moon Empire and established the knight system that ruled the world today. It was not wrong to say that it was a desecration of magic. But it was hard to say. In ancient times, there were definitely not only magicians and knight, but also many ancient warriors and ancient magicians. For example, bearskins, vampires, wizards, bronze-muscled warriors, and so on. Who knew whether the moon language of Casido referred to the knight or other ancient warriors? Casido might even be the ancient magicians' collective name for the various warrior professions such as the knight. Those who relied on muscle were all barbarians. Mozairos was the collective name for the various spellcasters. Weren't non-traditional magicians all evil forces that desecrate magic? In short, Casido and Mozairos could be understood as heresy. List understood and lost interest. He quickly followed the magicians in species identification and identified the species of the sprites. The 5 sprites were cocoa tree, turtleback bamboo, partridge hemp, scorpion banana, and leaf flower. Among them, the cocoa tree's fruit, the cocoa bean, was the raw material for making chocolate. Cocoa sprites were obviously as valuable as coffee sprites. The other 4 sprites were of no value. The 16 sprite worms corresponded to the worm stalks, which were plants that could be found in the forest. Among them, only 2 had economic value. One was a breadfruit sprite worm, which corresponded to a breadfruit tree. It tasted similar to bread and could be eaten as a meal. The other was a moon pistachio sprite worm, which was a kind of nut-based magic ingredient. Viscount Fox temporarily stopped capturing the moon killer serfs. I have a task for you. Find and transplant plants of the same species as my sprites from the forest. Each plant must form a plantation sufficient for worm stalks to grow. List instructed. Worm stalks could not survive alone, otherwise they would easily decay and wither. Although most sprites were judged to have no economic value, this was only temporary. In case one day a variant of the same species of plant was born, the value of sprites would immediately skyrocket. Fox accepted the order, "As you wish, Your Highness." In addition, the potato sprite Kutcha species is a potato, which can be used as a staple food. You have to build a potato plantation as soon as possible. It is already autumn, so if you hurry you can still plant potatoes in winter. With the worm stalks, the plants in the plantation would not freeze to death even in winter. It was just that they would stop growing. Chapter 850. The elves made the arrangements to complete the mission as soon as the plantation was built. After returning from the Moonslayer tribe, List had let his guard down. He would often patrol around on the invisible dragon and no longer hide himself. Up until now, Blazing Island had yet to build a dock. All the knights, craftsmen, serfs, and spellcasters were unable to leave after arriving. After all, the Great Maelstrom teleportation formation was a one-way one. The ships of Durut Red Apricot's fleet were basically stranded at the mouth of the Great Maelstrom River, unable to return without supplies. Therefore, there was almost no means of communication between this large island and the outside world other than the strictly vetted magic platforms. They could not even establish trade with the neighboring Tulip Islands. The Tulip family had just established a foothold on the island and had yet to establish a small town. It would probably take a long time before they could trade with Blazing Island. Therefore, even if the news of List riding a dragon was exposed, it would only settle on Blazing Island. A spellcaster walked into Kenley's office and reported, "President Kenley, these are the records of our interrogation of the listener of the Holy Tribe. There are some suspicious points that need to be pointed out." Kenley was editing the new translation of the moon language. Without raising her head, she asked, "What are the suspicious points?" The listener mentioned a dragon. He said that they were sent here by a dragon, and that a crystal dragon would suddenly disappear. The spellcaster tried to describe it more accurately. He seems to be talking about the dragon that Her Highness rode, but it doesn't seem to be the same as the fire dragon Leo. I don't know if the listener is lying. After listening, Kenli put down the quill in her hand, and her expression suddenly became serious. Put down Manzano, leave the records with me. As for the dragon that the listener mentioned, I will personally verify it with Her Highness. You don't have to worry about it. Also, don't discuss it in private. Yes, President Kenli. After Manzano left, Kenli picked up the interrogation records and said, Her Highness sure has a lot of secrets. This new dragon must be the invisible dragon that Master Akeroids once mentioned, right? Master was the title that the magicians used to refer to a chi. Because a chi was not only a magic shooter, but also an arcane art tutor, her status was respected. Invisible dragon? Kenli narrowed her eyes in thought. She had looked up information on this subject and knew that the invisible dragon was a legendary mystical dragon of the sacred dragon sequence. It could produce space rings. Kenli had seen the rings on List and Achi's hands, and she guessed that they were space rings. She had also seen the two of them suddenly take out items. Therefore, she was already convinced of the existence of the invisible dragon and guessed that Achi's magic technique plan was able to progress so quickly by relying on the invisible dragon's mysterious ability. Fire dragon, formless dragon, this dragon knight from a small island nation. Perhaps he really is the son of glory those night knights are shouting for. The era of wizards is long gone, the weave has already withered. The dragon knight is the true ruler. But what does this have to do with me? I just want to research magic. He burst into laughter. Kenli flipped through the interrogation records and began to summarize the contents of the interrogation. She had come all the way from the distant Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to Inferno Island. What she craved the most was magic and the truth itself. What did the worldly power struggles, wars and killings have to do with her? After becoming a wizard, her surname was no longer Magic Elephant, but Truth. Not only had Kenli guessed the existence of the invisible dragon, but many other knights had also guessed it. Orders of Chivalry took a nap on the way to capture the Moon Killer natives, and 2 knights went to a distant place to relieve themselves. All knights who landed on Inferno Island had developed good hygiene habits and no longer urinated or defecated anywhere. I've seen His Highness riding a different dragon. I've known it for a long time. I still remember the roar of the dragon when we were transporting the materials on the frame ship when we passed through the Great Maelstrom teleportation array. I heard it very clearly. It was a sharp, ear-piercing and intimidating sound. There's also a huge dragon's might. I remember it now. But what kind of dragon was that? I don't know. In short, His Highness is the son of glory favored by the night glory. There is no doubt about this. As long as we follow His Highness closely, we will become glorious nobles sooner or later. The two did not know that not far from them, Cross Buckthorn, the leader of the Orders of Chivalry, was also relieving himself. A moment later, Cross returned to the Orders of Chivalry and chatted with another leader, Durut Red Apricot. I just heard another knight discussing His Highness dragon. They were discussing how many dragons His Highness has. Durut replied in a somewhat clumsy serpentine. Even in private, these knights from the Eagle Kingdom who were used to speaking in the wind language began to speak in serpentine according to List's request. That's right. The knights' curiosity about dragons will never diminish. However, they are not the only ones curious. We are the same. That's right. Who would have thought that His Highness not only has 1 dragon but 2? Together with His Excellency Achilles, the nation of fire will be unprecedentedly powerful in the future. That's why there is a saying in my hometown, don't mourn for a lost dog. It may bring another dog back. We were captured in the middle of the sea. Who would know that we weren't abandoned by the glory of the night, but that we were deeply cared for by the glory of the night? Durut said and looked at Cross. Especially you. Crossing through the Great Maelstrom teleportation array once, you were promoted from a viscount to a count. If your former colleagues knew about this, they would be jealous of you. Cross smiled proudly. His Highness is generous. It is my honor to follow him. Some people were secretly happy that List had multiple dragons while others were frowning. Blue Dragon Island, Blue Sky Palace. The Sapphire Grand Duke's temples were already graying. He was aging faster than expected. At this moment, he was looking at eldest Prince Anthony with a solemn expression. Is what Angela said true? It shouldn't be false. Meopal admitted that List has 3 dragons after getting drunk. Among them, it has already been confirmed that the Fire Dragon and the Eagle Kingdom's lost light green gemstone dragon. As for the other dragon, Meopal isn't clear. As for Marquis Masiro, Angela simply couldn't get any information out of him. Although Masiro's talent is trash and his character isn't outstanding, he still inherited the shrewdness of the Taro family. Angela doesn't have the ability to get information out of him. The Grand Duke knocked on the table. This time, Angela delivered a letter to the family and made a great contribution. Later on her birthday, send a great sprite. Father, do we need to send a great sprite? Anthony was a bit reluctant. Even the dragon-rearing family didn't have many great sprites. The Grand Duke sighed. Do you think a great sprite is just a reward? That's to show the goodwill of the Sapphire family. I have studied Liszt for a long time. Although he is young, he can't be treated as a young person. He has a strong purpose in doing things, and each of his actions has a purpose. If Liszt knew that his unreliable thoughts and actions were praised by the Grand Duke, he would probably blush in shame. He really didn't have a purpose in doing things. Of course, releasing the news of 3 dragons was intentional. The Grand Duke's words couldn't be considered an exaggeration. Chapter 851. Only the Sapphire Grand Duke and his heir, Anthony, knew where the Sapphire family was headed. Liszt, who was more than 7,000 kilometers away, was not clear. He was very busy and had no time to pay attention to the situation outside the Flame Archipelago. Of course, a lot of information was still pouring into him. The rats organized by Xavier Oxtung and the blood servants managed by Mary Dawn were his 2 eyes hidden in the shadows. The rats were mainly responsible for inquiring about the internal information of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, and more to protect the territory from infiltration by foreign forces. The blood servants were dispatched to the Eagle Kingdom and the Steel Ridge Kingdom, mainly to lurk and wait for major movements to be discovered before giving an early warning. However, the current situation of the Sapphire family was stable. The Eagle Kingdom was busy withdrawing to maintain stability, and the Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Blast Furnace Kingdom were at war. No one had time to pay attention to the Flame Archipelago. The fleet of the Pinecone family has arrived at the mouth of the river Whirlpool. I'll go there myself and arrange the development work of the Pinecone family. Liszt received a message from the knight and made some arrangements. Let Viscount Vernal take an orders of chivalry and 5,000 serfs to the mouth of the river Whirlpool. From Firewood Town to the mouth of the river Whirlpool, the orders of chivalry could take the sloop that had just been launched at the dock. The ship went smoothly. Although it was not fast, it was better to save physical strength. After calculating the time, Vernal Inc. should have already arrived at the mouth of the river Whirlpool with the orders of chivalry. Liszt rode the invisible dragon Bard and set off to meet the Pinecone family that followed him. Boom! Arriving above the camp, Liszt jumped directly from the back of the invisible dragon. His figure slowly appeared after landing. This had become his standard appearance. He always liked to play with this kind of low-key and luxurious abrupt atmosphere. Your Highness. The orders of chivalry in the garrison camp saluted when they saw Liszt coming out of the dust. They were already used to it. Liszt patted the dust on his cloak. At this time, Vernal and Roland Pinecone had already come out to greet him. Your Highness. Liszt. Uncle, did everything go well on this voyage? Liszt motioned for the 2 of them not to be too polite, and then asked Viscount Roland cordially. The Pinecone family had already followed him, and their status was confirmed to be his followers, so in terms of etiquette, Liszt had already become the Lord of Roland. Thanks to the navigators you sent and the wind and water calming beads, we encountered 4 storms along the way, but we survived all of them without much loss, Viscount Roland replied with lingering fear in his heart. Ever since he decided to send out the expedition fleet to search for the new island, Liszt had entrusted the Guild of Magic to mass-produce the wind-calming Divine Pearl and the water-calming Divine Pearl to protect the safety of the sailing fleet. The sea was merciless. Even the largest royal speedboat could not compete with the waves. However, the wind-calming Divine Bead and the water-calming Divine Bead could calm the threat posed by the waves. It had to be said that in a world full of magic, there would always be a magical way to deal with it. It's good that you arrived safely, Liszt comforted him. At this time he saw that behind Viscount Roland, there was a young, slightly chubby knight. It was Viscount Roland's youngest son and Liszt's cousin Raleigh Pinecone. The other cousin, Russell, stayed in the family territory to deal with the handover of some territory and did not come along. The womenfolk of the Pinecone family also did not come along. Liszt. Raleigh wanted to greet him, but he was a little fearful. At that time, when he was still the Baron of the Flower Town, he and Liszt could still talk and laugh, and even show off the topaz pendant his grandfather had given him. But when Liszt became a dragon knight, he gradually felt that this cousin of his was a stranger, and he slowly developed a sense of awe. In particular, he often heard his father and mother admonish him on how to face the Dragon Knight. The difference in status stemming from the Knight system deepened Raleigh's sense of inferiority and fear. His cousin, whom he once teased and only received a tattered letter from his grandfather as a gift, had grown into one of the top figures in the world in terms of power, strength, and influence. He was no longer the little cousin who was disliked by the family in his memory. "Cousin Raleigh." List walked over and patted Raleigh on the shoulder with a smile. "Not bad, you have become an Earth Knight." Although he was not close to Aunt Melinda's relatives and had very little contact with them, but he still released enough cordiality. After all, the other party had already sought refuge with him. Raleigh smiled awkwardly. "I haven't even become an elite, I'm still far from it. If you hone yourself more, then becoming an elite Earth Knight will not be a problem." Seeing that Raleigh was really nervous, List no longer forced himself to reminisce with his cousin. He turned back and continued to talk to Viscount Roland. "I have already planned for the Pinecone family's arrangements. Uncle will develop here at the mouth of the whirlpool and will be responsible for the trade with the Tulip Island in the future." "I will be responsible for the trade with the Tulip Island?" "Yes, mainly because the two islands share resources. The Tulip family will go all out to develop the Tulip Island, but they definitely don't have enough labor. I will support them with some serfs." "You don't have enough serfs, do you?" "Haha, it was not enough in the past, but now there are too many serfs. There are a large number of indigenous tribes on Flame Island, all of which are a source of high-quality serfs. Because there are too many of them, my temporary knight followers are not enough, and I may not be able to digest so many serfs." "This is really exciting news." Viscount Roland hesitated a little and said, "Can the Pinecone family also buy a batch of serfs?" "There is no need to buy them. You can catch them yourself, but pay attention to capturing serfs at the lowest cost. Don't cause too much unnecessary killing. Flame Island is too big. If you want to fully develop it, you need a large number of serfs. Capturing all the indigenous tribes is still not enough." At this stage there were too many indigenous people to digest, but when the knight class developed and grew, the number of indigenous people would become scarce. Therefore, every indigenous person killed was a loss of resources. Vernal added, "With the consent of His Highness, our orders of chivalry rarely use the method of capturing serfs. We mainly recruit serfs by luring the ancient mages. When most of the indigenous tribes are attracted to serf life, even the ancient mages can't stop the annexation and obediently work for us." Countless years of forest life had seriously degraded the intelligence of the ancient mages. They could not distinguish the naked nibbling of the foreign knight. Even if they sold themselves, they would still have to count the knight's money. Although these ancient mages' spellcasting level was not high, the magic effect was good. After unified management and continuous brainwashing, they could probably serve as pioneers in the development of the forest. They were much better than the black uncles in Africa. At least the Moonslayers were not lazy and would work hard. After all, the bloodline of their ancestors came from the Moon Empire, not from guerrillas. Immediately, the Pinecone family took root at the mouth of the Whirlpool River. The family was an old Viscount family, and they were relatives of the Taro family. They had accumulated a lot of wealth. The knight who was willing to follow, plus the temporarily recruited Earth Knight, totaled more than 300. There were more than 800 trainee knight, and the first batch of 1,000 serfs to migrate. This was not a small help for the development of Flame Island. Chapter 852. It was mid-November. The Potato Sprite Cookie's potato plantation had been built long ago. In addition to List coaxing Cookie to plant a lot of potato sprouts, Orders of Chivalry also found a lot of wild potatoes from the wilderness and planted them all in the plantation. In the next few days, various sprite worm stalks landed and plantations were built one after another. Orders of Chivalry attacked many large tribes and rescued 8 sprite worms in succession, which were handed over to List for a contract. The plantations were also quickly planned. All the plantations were very large, but the plants in the plantations were actually very sparse. But in any case, the smoke mission was successfully completed. Mission completed. Reward: discovery of a new island. The reward had already been issued, but List had yet to receive the exploration fleet's report. He had no time to care about the exploration fleet's report because the new mission had already been issued. Mission: Achi has perfected all the detailed steps of the Magic Gate experiment. Next, it is time to witness a miracle. However, behind the miracle is countless sweat. Please assist Achi in completing the Magic Gate experiment. Reward: Achi's new elemental embodiment. The Magic Gate experiment is finally about to begin. List was not surprised at all. Achi often talked to him about the progress of the Magic Gate experiment, so he was very clear about it. He was also ready to work for the Magic Gate together with the invisible dragon Bud. He pondered for a moment about the reward of the smoke mission. Achi's new elemental embodiment, what will it be? She has already grasped the water element and the ice element, and the target for her third elemental embodiment is the earth element. If nothing unexpected happens, it should be the earth element. He had already arrived at the wizard tower and saw Achi, who was writing notes. Achi, when will the Magic Gate experiment begin? Achi is writing down the details of the Magic Gate experiment. When the time comes, I will need Big Brother and Bud's cooperation. It will take about a week to rehearse. For the time being, we will begin the Magic Gate experiment a week later. Achi's face was a lot of fatigue and her eyes were bloodshot, which was rare. For the sake of the Magic Gate experiment, she had hardly slept recently. List was very distressed. Since the theory has been completed, there is no need to rush the experiment. After writing down the details of the experiment, you should take a good rest first. You are not allowed to work with such intensity again. Compared to magic or experiments, your body is the most important, understand? Achi smiled sweetly. And Achi understands. Rubbing her blue hair, he was in a trance for a moment, as if Achi was still the soft and weak little siren, not the great magic shooter who accepted the pilgrimage of the sorcerers. In the end, Achi wrote detailed operation of the Magic Gate experiment overnight. After handing it over to List, she spent some time explaining it to List in detail before List forced her to rest. Holding the notebook, List leaned against the formless dragon bard and read it carefully. The experiment seemed whimsical, but the details were very detailed. The main thing was to open up the nodes of two material spaces and then connect them by tearing the weave apart. The operation was a little complicated, but Bard's ability was enough to complete it. He opened the two magic doors. Just as he was familiarizing himself with the details of the operation, the reward for the smoke mission came late. Finally, they received the good news from the exploration fleet. They had discovered an island 500 kilometers west of the Flame Archipelago. After the joint exploration of the three exploration fleets, they discovered that it was a new archipelago. Although the area of the island was not big, it was probably smaller than the Whirlpool Archipelago. But the geographical location was good. It was in the direction of the Flame Archipelago to the continent, which would shorten the sailing distance. Order Captain Yevich to continue leading the exploration fleet to the legendary continent and open up a route for the Flame Archipelago. Also, investigate the information of the continent's coast. Find out the distance between the Flame Archipelago and the continent, and find out which kingdom this part of the coastline belongs to. After a pause, List ordered again, tell Yevich that when he reaches the coastline of the continent, he will be promoted to Earl. Yes, Your Highness, Lucy and the twins replied. They performed well as operators and were worthy of List's trust. Not long after learning from Achi, they learned ordinary magic and advanced from their status as magic apprentices to ordinary sorcerers. They were becoming more and more qualified to be Achi's assistant. A week passed in the blink of an eye. Achi, who had rested well, began to host the Magic Gate experiment. List and Bud had already memorized the operation manual and knew all the details like the back of their minds. It was similar to the previous node observation experiment, where Achi set up a large-scale magic formation. A total of 2 had to be set up, and they chose to set them up in the north and south directions of the swirling mountain. After the first magic formation was activated, List and Bard became one with the dragon and quickly used the power of the magic formation to break through the power of an adult dragon. Then they forcefully opened up the node of the material boundary. They then rushed to the second magic formation and forcefully opened up the node. At this time, the human and dragon followed the established steps of the experiment and entered the world outside the material boundary from the node. In the crystal white vision, the 2 adjacent nodes were especially clear. Bard, get to work. Build a magic channel between the nodes, complete the connection between the nodes, tear apart the magic net and make a real space channel. List's mind was clear. Without any delay, he controlled the invisible dragon Bard and began to release space magic, using the invisible dragon itself as a bridge to connect the 2 nodes. After the magic was connected, they could feel the attraction between the 2 nodes. Let's begin. Bard spread his wings and suddenly clawed at the pitch-black void with his claws, grabbing the space magic that had already formed a line. Then he flew outwards with all his strength. The magic threads were constantly pulled and pulled, pulling the 2 nodes in the same direction, and creating circles of ripples in the world outside the material boundary. In the area of the ripples, the faint traces of the magic net could be seen. This is the moment. Explode! List keenly sensed the movement of the magic net. The human and dragon erupted and pulled with all their strength. The next moment, as if something in the void had shattered, the space magic threads quickly pulled out a tubular channel. And this tubular channel just happened to pass through the magic net, already piercing through the magic net. However, unlike the wormhole space of the Great Maelstrom Magic Teleportation Formation, this channel was not stable. As the magic net continued to compress, it soon showed signs of collapse. The two material nodes also began to become unstable. Let's go, Bard. Let's test out the smoothness of the channel. List did not waste any time. The human and dragon quickly flew into the newly formed channel. To the left was the magic formation at the south of the Maelstrom Mountain, and to the right was the magic formation at the north. He chose to go left first. The spatial channel was very short, and in the blink of an eye, they passed through the ripples and arrived in the real material world. It was indeed the entrance to the magic formation at the south of the Maelstrom Mountain. At this moment, the entrance flickered with a dark blue light. No matter how one looked at it, it was collapsing inward, forming a vortex door. List did not waste any time. He once again rushed into the spatial channel and entered the entrance. Cracks had already appeared in the channel under the constant pressure of the magic net. The human and dragon did not dare to stay any longer. They directly passed through the channel as fast as they could and rushed out from another exit. Suddenly, they arrived at the entrance to the magic formation at the north of the Maelstrom Mountain. Just as he rushed out, the dark blue light at the entrance did not last long before it suddenly exploded. All the light disappeared into nothingness, and the magic formation also collapsed at this moment. Many precious magic materials lost their luster at this moment. Their magic power was exhausted and they became waste. However, List laughed. He jumped down from the back of the invisible dragon and laughed heartily. Achi, the experiment is a success. We have successfully opened the magic gate. In front of the magic formation, Achi's eyes were like whirlpools. It was as if she had seen through List's two transits and seen the situation in the spatial channel. Chapter 853. This chapter is to congratulate Boss Jango. It's only one chapter for now and will be followed up with 5 chapters. Thank you for your continued support. Big brother, Achi seems to have captured some strange information. Achi's pupils were still whirlpools, which was the look of the super magic eyes. What strange information? List asked casually, still immersed in the shock and joy of opening a magic gate. It's a special magic composition. It's very strange, just like the space magic Achi has been studying. It's really similar. It's very similar to the magic information on Bard's body. Achi said and looked at Bard, who stuck his head out. Big brother, can you ask Bard to condense space magic? Bard could already understand the human language, so Achi could directly command him. She believed that he would be willing to do as she said. However, Achi was a considerate little siren and respected List, the invisible dragon's knight. No problem. List immediately used the dragon heart code to communicate with Bard. Bard opened his mouth and spat out a dragon's breath. The strong space magic was like a cloud of white mist, constantly cutting the space. When the stones on the ground touched the white mist, they instantly shattered into powder silently. The dragon's breath was more powerful than the little fire dragon Leo's high-temperature dragon breath. After a moment, Achi nodded. Big brother, it's done. How is it? List asked. It's confirmed that it's the nature of space magic. Big brother, Achi has already mastered the special operation method of magic particles. It seems that she can already condense space magic. As she spoke, she raised her left hand and stretched out a slender, white finger. A white light bloomed on the fingertip. Then, she gently stretched out her finger and pointed at the void, and the finger slowly disappeared. However, after List cast magic eyes, he clearly saw her finger emitting white mana feedback. Her finger had reached into the material boundary and could hide like the invisible dragon. Seeing this, List suddenly realized that the so-called reward of the smoke mission, Achi's new elemental incarnation, was not the earth elemental incarnation. It was the space elemental incarnation. Sure enough, when he summoned the smoke mission, he found that the magic gate experiment was completed, and the mission was also completed. Mission completed. Reward, Achi's space elemental incarnation. So powerful. Since ancient times, there has never been a high mage who could release space magic and obtain space elemental incarnation. That might not be the case. The Great Maelstrom Teleportation Array is a masterpiece of the ancient High Mages. Maybe someone among them grasped space magic. In any case, Maya Chi is a peerless genius with frightening talent. He was extremely shocked. List did not show it. In front of a Chi, he still had to maintain the good demeanor of a dragon knight, a scholar, a king, and a brother. He just smiled and clapped his hands. Incredible, a Chi. You can actually control spatial magic. Given time, I'm afraid that you will be able to open a magic door all by yourself and travel through the entire world. A Chi withdrew her finger. It was still very strenuous for her to maintain spatial elemental incarnation. Now that a Chi has obtained spatial elemental incarnation and has a much deeper understanding of space, the magic gate will soon be truly realized. Big Brother has the invisible dragon Bard, and a Chi can also travel through space with Big Brother. List ruffled her hair. That's right. Bard also let out an excited cry from the side. This invisible dragon was quite proud of itself. It was because it saw a Chi's terrifying talent that it condescended to let List start 2 spiritual battles, and finally lowered the standard to become a dragon knight. Its purpose was to stay by a Chi's side and use her ability to guide the way. And the subsequent development was just as it had envisioned. It was no longer afraid of getting lost when traveling through space. Big Brother, a Chi needs time to adapt and practice space elemental incarnation. But before that, there is still information about the magic gate that Big Brother needs to complete. Just say it. In the magic gate experiment, the biggest restraining condition is that the weave shrinks, which will compress the newly formed spatial channel, causing the node entrance to collapse. To resist the weave's compression, a lot of magic power must be consumed. This is not realistic. No magic array can compare to the weave in terms of magic power. Indeed. So, have you thought of any way? We can directly look for natural nodes. A Chi nodded. Natural nodes? Yes, the entrance and exit of the Great Maelstrom Magic Teleportation Array are natural nodes. It should be that the ancient magic shooters found the natural nodes and connected the 2 nodes, so that they could engrave the wormhole space eternally and resist the compression of the weave. Big Brother, as long as you find more natural nodes, a Chi can also set up an eternal magic gate. I understand. I will find more natural nodes with Bard. The first natural node that came to List's mind was the entrance to the ruins of the Moon People's sacred mountain. Although the Hourglass Valley was a bit dangerous, it should not be difficult to open an exit. Once the magic gate was opened, the vast area of the Flame Archipelago would be more closely connected. A Chi continued, there is another problem with natural nodes that needs to be paid attention to. The process of connecting different nodes may not be smooth. The Great Maelstrom Magic Teleportation Array is an example. The repulsive force of the wormhole space is unidirectional, so it can only be used for one-way teleportation. To establish a 2-way teleportation, 2 natural nodes with very high compatibility may be needed. I will try to find more natural nodes and then slowly choose the right natural node to build a magic gate. In fact, it doesn't matter if it's unidirectional. At worst, we can just go around and make other parallel reverse magic gates. List's idea was very simple. A unidirectional magic gate was about A can only go to B, and B can only go to C, but then find a magic gate that C can only go to A so B can return to A through C. Chi also understood this. Yes. Returning to Infernal City. List's excitement had not yet subsided. He was complacently thinking about how to find natural nodes and build a magic gate. At this time, the smoke in front of him slowly appeared and condensed into a paragraph of serpentines. It was the latest smoke mission. Mission: Leo has not returned to the Black Horse Island territory for a long time. Goldie, Little Red, and Little Purple are growing slowly, but they cannot dispel the loneliness in the heart of the Phoenix Parasol Tree Great Sprite Infant. As the master of the sprite, why not solve its troubles? Reward: a jade stone mine. Jade vein. Chapter 854. Because of the magic door experiment, the magic materials in Firewood Town were almost consumed, and a batch was urgently needed to be replenished from the fire territory. After List explained, he and Chi set off to return to Black Horse Island. Although Chi could switch part of the space elemental incarnation, it had not been officially developed, so the invisible dragon could not be wrapped in space magic and could not accompany List through the maelstrom. So the two still rode the dragon to the seaside, and then changed to Chi's shell. Of course, they first flew to the endless volcanoes on the invisible dragon and found Leo. Then they rode Leo to the sea. As a dragon knight, without a dragon, his combat effectiveness would be seriously reduced, and it would be troublesome in case of danger. Only when Leo was in the form of magic could he have enough confidence not to fear any ambush. In fact, after the war between the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Blast Furnace Kingdom, he was guarding against one thing. The Eagle Kingdom might be accumulating strength to prepare for revenge. The royal family of the Eagle Kingdom would certainly be unwilling to let a newborn dragon knight ruin their decades of preparation for the battle of dragon slaying. Moreover, the light green gemstone dragon was missing in the sea, and List was quite suspicious. After List deliberately released the news of the light green gemstone dragon, it was no longer a suspicion but a fact. Once the Eagle Kingdom is ready to retaliate, the scale of the battle of dragon slaying will definitely not be small. At present, the Eagle Kingdom has 8 dragons, 5 of which have knight. The 5 vassal countries have 5 dragons, 2 of which have dragon knight. Although it is impossible to evacuate all the dragons from the border, if they are desperate, 4 or 5 dragon knight may be dispatched. After Sapphire Grand Duke declined this year's Development Order War, List had been thinking deeply about the possibility of the Eagle Kingdom's revenge. In any case, he had become a thorn in the side of the Eagle Kingdom. In the process of building the Fire Kingdom, sooner or later a battle of dragon slaying would break out to re-establish the Master of the Sea and a new order in this corner of the legendary continent. If I were the king of the Eagle Kingdom, I would definitely show weakness to the surrounding countries first, and then stabilize the internal forces. Then, I would choose a suitable time to gather all the Dragon Knight forces and launch a magnificent dragon-slaying battle to wash away my shame. Of course, the location of the Flame Archipelago was a mystery. Whether it was the Tulip family's fleet or the Pinecone family's fleet, the Flame Territory's navigator was in charge of leading the way. The others did not even know the location of the Flame Islands. If the Eagle Kingdom wanted to launch a dragon-slaying war, the best battlefield was still the Sapphire Islands and the Azure Sea. Therefore, when List returned to the Flame Territory, there was still a certain degree of danger. This was also the reason why he had to bring Leo along. It was not to deliberately show off that he had a dragon. Leo would provide temporary support, and Achi would provide support from the sea. It was enough to ensure that he could escape any life-or-death situation. If the battle of dragon slaying could not kill him, the rest of the time would be his personal performance time. Unless the Eagle Kingdom wanted to perish together, they would absolutely be unable to face his retaliation. Anyway, the war of slaying the dragon might happen or it might not. But no matter where he went, he had to have at least one dragon to accompany him. After tossing and turning, it was already December when he returned to Black Horse Island, and it would be New Year's Day in half a month. List did not know if he could spare time to spend this year's New Year's Day with the Tulip family. Both he and the Marquis of Oxtail were busy. He was developing the Flame Islands, and the Marquis of Oxtail was also busy developing the Tulip Island. The construction of the Oxtail territory had been idle. When the fire dragon descended from the sky with a wild dragon's might, the people of Black Horse Island already knew that their great dragon knight lord had returned. Oh! When Butler Carter heard the roar of the fire dragon, he ignored the crystal tableware he was wiping in his hands and stood up excitedly. He shouted loudly, "Put down your work and tidy up your clothes. Servants and maids, quickly gather in the hall. Mrs. Morrison, check the list of maids. Tom, check the list of servants. Mr. Carter, is the Lord back?" Tom had been promoted to the head of the servants. The servant, who used to be responsible for carrying water, had skillfully taken on the job of assistant to Carter's butler. "Of course, cheer up, Tom. The Lord doesn't like the listless appearance of the servants." "Understood." In the corridor of the castle, Mrs. Morrison's voice gradually became louder. "Well, girls, put down the linen in your hands, tidy up your clothes, and gather in the hall downstairs. Don't hesitate, hurry up. You are the maids of Thorn Castle, the maids who serve the Dragon Knight Royal Highness." "Coming, Mrs. Morrison." "Are my clothes a little wrinkled? Is the Lord back? I have never seen the Lord before. I'm so nervous." Just as the old and new servants were busy gathering to welcome the arrival of the Lord of Thorn Castle, in the square outside the castle, List and Achi jumped off the dragon's back together. Under the respectful salute of the knight, they walked towards the castle. Leo flew to the pile of rocks on the side of Thorn Castle. Originally, List promised to build a 100-meter-high stone platform for him, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was unrealistic. The weight of the stone platform itself was difficult to pile up to a height of 100 meters, so the stones produced by the Blizzard Beast squad were piled up casually and let Leo temporarily use it as a foothold. Clatter. 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 The phoenix parasol tree was next to the pile of rocks. The 3 fire dragon birds, Goldie, Little Red, and Little Purple, were sleeping in their nests in the tree. Suddenly they woke up, let out a cheerful cry, flapped their wings and flew towards Leo. The phoenix parasol tree elf, Infant, who was in a daze on the phoenix parasol tree, also saw the long-lost fire dragon descending from the sky and landing on the familiar pile of rocks. Screech. It flew up at once, but it was not arrogant enough to directly approach Leo. Because it had already seen the 3 fire dragon birds, Goldie, Little Red, and Little Purple, being directly flashed away by Leo's wings. This fire dragon, which made it excited, had a wild and arrogant personality, and would not have any kind of affection just because they were familiar with each other. So Infant thought about it, turned around and flew towards Thorn Castle. It was very clear that only one person could suppress Leo's evil thoughts, List. When Infant flew to the castle, the servants stood on both sides of the castle gate. Under the leadership of the 2 housekeepers, Mr. Carter and Mrs. Morrison, they bowed to welcome the return of their master. It was just that the original neat welcoming atmosphere was disturbed by a few elves. The thorn elf, Ella, put her hands on her waist and landed on List's head. She pointed at the elves flying around her and said, "Be honest with me, step back, wow. I'm talking to you, Goldthread elf, step back, hurry up. You're really a fox pretending to be a tiger." Infant slowly flew towards List. He was not afraid of the grumpy elf, Ella. They were all great elves and no one was much more powerful than the other. It was just that the pea-elf, Ike, was addicted to rope and could not extricate herself. The giant algae elf was free and unfettered on the bottom of the sea and never participated in the disputes on the ground. The mangrove elf, Nami, rarely lived in the castle, and Infant himself was with the fire dragon bird all day long. This allowed Ella to dominate Thorn Castle and become a tyrant feared by countless elves. Chapter 855. I'm back, Annie. List greeted Annie, the phoenix parasol tree great elf. From the many messy elves' emotions, List could feel Annie's desire to be close to Leo. This was originally something that List wanted to solve, so he responded with a reassuring mood and waved his hand. All the sprites immediately followed behind him, chirping as they returned to Thorn Castle. Ella, take them back to the worm room. I'll visit you later. Whoa, Ella will beat up anyone who doesn't listen. Ella got List's order and immediately swaggered around. It turned out that Ella had become List's trusted subordinate. Otherwise, why would List choose it instead of the other great elves? Although List's original intention was that Ella was more irascible, the deterrence of a bully was always stronger. Under Ella's banishment, all the little elves had to fly along the corridor back to the worm room. Only Annie remained unmoved and still followed List. Annie could not wait to get close to Leo and sniff the sulphurous smell of fire. Master, are you going to rest for a few days before leaving, or are you going to wait until after the New Year's Day? Butler Carter waited for List to comfort the elves before asking. I'll leave after a few days. It depends on the situation during the new year. I may not be able to return to Thorn Castle for the new year. If Master doesn't celebrate the new year at Thorn Castle, this year's new year will not have much of an atmosphere. The atmosphere of the first New Year's of Thorn Castle last year is nostalgic. Carter said regretfully. Last year, the Taro family and the Tulip family celebrated the New Year's in Thorn Castle. List smiled. Even if I don't come back in time, Thorn Castle will celebrate the New Year as usual. Carter, you'll be responsible for letting the servants celebrate the New Year together. Master has always been so kind. Mrs. Mawson came over with a cup of steaming hot milk tea. This is freshly brewed Bampo milk. The steward of the cattle farm has just delivered a batch of fresh milk. This is the fresh milk from the cows specially marked by the master. Bampo cattle were divided into different grades. The few cows that were directly infected from the embryonic stage belonged to the purebred dragon breed and had not yet reached the age of milk production. Although the adult cows that were directly infected were not pure enough, the quality of their milk was still very high, and it had always been List's exclusive milk. List took the cup and took a sip. Suddenly, the aroma of milk filled his mouth. Well, I haven't had fresh Bampo milk for a long time. It makes me feel like I've returned to the leisure time of the past. Master, you've really been too busy this year. Gulp, gulp, gulp. List drank up a glass and a half of milk, then said with some emotion, Yeah, it's been too busy this year. The 3 dragons had to be raised and the Flame Island had to be developed. Thousands of things could not be separated from his maintenance. It seemed that from the moment he rode the fire dragon Leo, life was like a horse driven by a whip, galloping non-stop. He never stopped to enjoy a few days of undisturbed life without any trifles. After thinking about it, the poor days in Flower Town were the most pleasant. He dreamed of riding a dragon and patrolled the crops of the territory every day. Life was simple and he didn't have to think too much. Those days could no longer be returned. As a dragon knight, he carried the ambition of building a country. Since he had chosen this more difficult path, he must go on unswervingly. "Mrs. Morrison, ask the maid to prepare hot water. I'm going to take a bath later." "Yes, master." "Mr. Carter, get ready. There will be a banquet at Thorn Castle tonight. All officials on Black Horse Island are invited to attend." "As you wish, master." After giving the order, List took Infant out of the castle and walked to Leo's resting place. The 3 fire dragon chicks were still circling around Leo, but they did not dare to call out anymore. Leo would not be polite to them just because they were List's pets. If it weren't for List's will that often killed the evil thoughts of the fire dragon, I'm afraid the 3 birds would have been stuffed in between Leo's teeth. "Infant, go, I'll have a good chat with Leo. You can touch them if you want." List smiled and patted Infant's head. Thank you, List." Infant flapped his transparent wings and couldn't wait to fly to Leo's side. He reached out and touched a scale, then took his hand back and smelled the sulfur smell on his hand. His expression suddenly became intoxicated. Leo was very upset. Although Infant was the size of a flea in his eyes, he still didn't like being approached by little things. List used the Dragon Heart Code to negotiate with him. "Leo, I plan to move Infant to a place near the volcano where you train. In the future, when you come out to bask in the sun, let him touch you." "Why would I allow a flea to touch my body? He's evolving into a dragon elf, which will be of great help to me." "Isn't helping me the same as helping you? Think about it carefully. I need magic potions. Touch 10 potions at a time." "You're robbing me." List stared at him. 1 potion at a time, no bargaining allowed. In the end, after Leo asked for a sky-high price and List sat on the ground and argued fiercely, 1 human and 1 dragon reached an agreement to touch 2 potions at a time. The once here meant a complete enjoyment, not just touching a scale once. Otherwise, with Infant's method of touching scales more than 10 times in a short period of time, List would be completely defeated in 2 days. After setting the price, Leo laid down on the pile of rocks and fell asleep, leaving Infant to continue touching and indulging in the process. Mission completed. Reward, a jade mine. Being intoxicated by the smell of the fire dragon, Infant's worries were all swept away. List's smoke mission was also completed, and he got a jade mine. However, he didn't know where the jade mine was for the time being. It was probably somewhere on Flame Island. Only Infant continued to be intoxicated by Leo's smell. List walked back while paying attention to the new smoke mission. After a long period of exploration, the masters of the Fire Dragon Brick Factory didn't figure out how to make porcelain. However, they found that limestone can be made into lime, but this lime doesn't have good adhesion and seems to lack a necessary ingredient. Why not help them solve this problem? Reward, the long-awaited cement. Cement had always been a product that List had been looking forward to. Although the territory had rubber that was 10 times stronger than cement, using rubber to build roads and houses was really overkill. Now that rubber was widely used in shipbuilding, equipment, containers, and other industries, it could be said to be a strategic material. He really couldn't bear to use rubber in construction. Therefore, cement was the best substitute, allowing rubber to be used in more valuable places. Finally going to develop cement. It's been a few years since the Fire Dragon Brick Factory was built, and it finally paid off. The Fire Dragon Brick Factory was a large workshop with a brick workshop, pottery workshop, charcoal workshop, and so on. It had been firing cement and porcelain according to List's requirements. However, porcelain couldn't be fired well, and cement couldn't be made. Chapter 856. List honestly didn't know much about lime and cement. He only knew that these things were calcined and were very common. But what was the connection between the two, or what was the composition, was not clear. But if I remember correctly, I once watched a documentary about China's contract to build the Mongolian NEI Railway in Africa. It mentioned the problem of cement production. Because of the lack of raw materials, Chinese experts eventually chose local volcanic ash as one of the raw materials for cement. When watching this documentary, List was very proud. This was a great achievement of his motherland. What he remembered more was the production of cement. They could actually use volcanic ash to make cement. So, Thinking of this, he immediately went to inspect the fire dragon brick factory and provided new ideas to the craftsmen in charge of developing cement. He asked them to mix lime and volcanic ash and try to see if they could develop cement. There was a lot of volcanic ash on Dodo Island, but the voyage of 800 kilometers was a bit far. Coral Island also had a weathered extinct volcano. Liszt had also looked for signs of magma, from which volcanic ash could be excavated. Liszt didn't need to worry about these mundane matters. He only needed to provide a general direction. In the following time, he teased the elves and patrolled the territory while waiting for a chi to set up experiments and prepare magic materials for the mages of the Guild of Magic. The officials had prepared 10 large frame ships, filled with supplies and personnel, to be transported to Infernal City. December 10th. Ready to set off. Whoa. The thorn sprite Ella was very reluctant to let Liszt leave. Stay safe in the castle. Don't bully the little elves at will. When I build a castle and plantation in my new home, I will move you there. Remember to come early. Okay. Well, Ella let go of his hand and watched Liszt leave. Among all the great and little elves, it was the most emotional one. It was not known if it was because Liszt's thinking was very different from the people of this world, or because Ella itself was different. In short, among Liszt's many strange elves, Ella was still the most special. 10 large frame ships set sail, including the frame ship that had been parked under the Thorn Castle. The cabin of this ship was sealed with the Emerald Dragon's hind legs. Now that the Infernal City was established on the Infernal Island, he decided to bring the Emerald Dragon's hind legs to the Infernal City and hide them in the cellar of the new castle that was about to be completed. Precious treasures related to the Mind Fruit Tree and the mystifying dragon's Mind Fruit should be kept by his side. He returned to Fireforge City and found the formless dragon Bard, who had already returned. Liszt didn't stop to rest. He rode on Bard and sent the little fire dragon Leo, the Phoenix Parasol Tree Great Elf Infant, and the 3 fire dragon birds that followed him to the endless volcanoes. Leo quickly transformed from his magic form into a body of flesh and blood. Then he plunged into the boiling magma of the volcano of Doomsday. Liszt brought Infant to look for a suitable place. Finally they found a dormant volcano halfway up the mountain. Infant happily planted his worm stalk. The tall Phoenix Parasol Tree uprooted from the ground and put a nest on it. Goldie, Lil Red and Lil Purple immediately clucked around the Phoenix Parasol Tree. Infant, I'll let Leo come here often to rest. You can touch it to your heart's content. Liszt, you're so nice. Infant was sincerely grateful to Liszt. If it weren't for Liszt's help, he wouldn't have been able to get close to his favorite dragon. Help me take care of these 3 birds. Don't worry, Liszt. Goldie, Lil Red and Lil Purple, listen to me, Infant said confidently. He wasn't bragging. As early as the 2 adult fire dragon birds, they built a nest on the Phoenix Parasol Tree and didn't hurt Infant, which showed Infant's ability. The 3 birds were now very dependent on Infant. Apart from Leo, they were closest to Infant. Perhaps it was fate or perhaps it was mutual attraction. Protect yourself. My forces haven't extended here yet. Although Leo's draconic aura covers the endless volcanoes, you still have to be careful. Goldie, Lil Red and Lil Purple will help me fight. Although they were young birds, the 3 fire dragon birds had already learned the fire magic engraved in their bloodline, Flame Slash. With a flap of their wings, they instantly condensed flames into blades with shocking power. It was a piece of cake to deal with low-level World of Warcraft. Even if it was against mid-level World of Warcraft, it wouldn't be a problem. As for high-level World of Warcraft, within the range of Leo's draconic aura, no high-level World of Warcraft would casually invade. Therefore, Infant's safety was basically not a problem. Bard, let's go. The invisible dragon flapped its wings and quickly entered the material boundary. Then, it forcefully tore the boundary open and stepped into the world outside of the material world. Crystal White Orbit activated and activated mana recovery positioning. While flying, it searched for possible natural nodes. At this moment, Liszt suddenly had an idea. Can the effect of mana recovery positioning be strengthened? The effect of the Chi secret technique Magic Eye, after fusing with the dragon, obtained the dragon's eye trajectory and the crystal white orbit with distinct levels. He just thought of a point. In addition to Magic Eye, he also had 2 Chi secret techniques, Aura Decay and Spiral Rotation. Aura Decay didn't play much of a role in the Dragon Knight stage, so he had abandoned it. Spiral Rotation also didn't have a good effect on the Dragon Knight, so he hadn't practiced it for a long time. The spiral circulation is a kind of combat aura circulation technique. If I use it on Bard's spatial magic and search through the spiral magic radiation, will I be able to pinpoint the feedback of the boundary of matter more precisely? Once he thought of it, he immediately practiced the spiral circulation with Bard. Anyway, it was just a try. He wouldn't lose anything if he failed, but if he succeeded, he would gain a lot. So, spiral rotation fused with mana recovery positioning. The radiation of spatial magic appeared in a spiral shape, but the effect didn't seem to be too obvious. In the world outside the material boundary, there was still no response from the surroundings. It was basically the same as the previous feedback from mana recovery positioning. Did I fail? Just as he was about to give up, suddenly, there was a trace of a special fluctuation in the distance. The man and the dragon were shocked at the same time. They had found a natural node. However, Liszt didn't control Bard to approach. Instead, he signaled Bard to stop using spiral rotation and directly use ordinary mana recovery positioning to lock. In this way, he suddenly found that the special fluctuation that could be felt before could no longer be felt. Bard, try using spiral rotation again. Woo! Spiral rotation was used. Soon, the special fluctuation was once again detected by mana recovery positioning. Although the fluctuation was very weak, the location was very clear. Go! Liszt was overjoyed. He was really a genius. He had developed another powerful skill. He directly called this upgraded version of mana recovery positioning skill spiral positioning. The birth of spiral positioning meant that the value of Chi secret techniques had returned to his field of vision. Originally, when the magic eye fused with the dragon and exerted a strong effect, he had a huge desire for Chi secret techniques. However, the weakening of the aura and the dispensable spiral rotation made him waver in his belief in Chi secret techniques. Except for the special magic eye, other Chi secret techniques seemed to be useless to the Dragon Knight. Therefore, his motivation to search for Chi secret techniques gradually slackened. Now, spiral rotation made Chi secret techniques of great value again. Chapter 857. The natural node was hidden quite deeply, but under the powerful searchability of the spiral positioning, it still had nowhere to hide. The invisible dragon quickly approached the natural node, and then began to rely on its talent to break the material boundary of the natural node, which was not thick in the first place. The moment the boundary was torn, Liszt saw the scenery outside. It was a secluded environment with lush trees. When he and the invisible dragon completely flew out of the natural node, it suddenly became clear that this was the inside of the crater of an extinct volcano. After flying out of the volcano, the view was high, and not far to the left was the volcano where the Phoenix parasol tree was located. There were 9 active volcanoes and many extinct volcanoes, most of which had not been named. This extinct volcano also did not have a name. The natural node is inside the crater. In this case, transportation will be a bit inconvenient, unless the volcanic tunnel is opened. Well, if a Chi chooses this place as one of the magic gates, I'll organize a group of ancient mages to bombard it and try to open the volcanic tunnel as soon as possible. Thorny ironwood, rubber water, and the cement that was about to be developed, the ability to build tunnels was already available. Although there were no large shield tunneling machines in this world, there was magic. Mage's magic was not good in combat, but if it was converted to civilian use, the effect was obvious. Even if the ancient mages could not penetrate the rock layer inside the mountain, there was still a Chi, a magic shooter whose super magic, spiral ultra-high pressure water drill, could even crush metal, let alone a mere mountain. So it was. After finding the first natural node, Liszt's heart was on fire. Together with the invisible dragon Bard, they continued to escape outside the material world to find new natural nodes. At this time, the powerful searchability of the spiral positioning was fully demonstrated. Soon he found the second natural node. After opening the node, there was turbulent seawater outside, crashing violently on the material boundary, but unable to enter outside the material world. Unfortunately, the node is in the sea and it seems to be in the deep sea. This node probably can't be developed. He did not even dare to go out. Bard could not swim and it would be a big joke if he drowned in the sea. So he left the natural node and continued to fly in the world outside the material world, searching for natural nodes. The material world was very big, but the world outside the material world did not have the concept of big, as if everything was squeezed together. To use a very vivid metaphor, the material world was a huge white paper. Each point on the white paper could only move on the white paper. The world outside of matter was the void outside the white paper. Under normal latitude, The distance between each point on the white paper would naturally be the shortest if one walked in a straight line on the white paper. However, the world beyond the material world was like crumpling a piece of white paper into a ball. If one continued to walk on the surface of the white paper, the distance would not change. However, if one walked on the outside of the white paper, it would be very easy to connect two originally unreachable points together. The natural node was to find such a point that could go outside the white paper. There were no boundaries, no distance, and even the concept of time was a blur. The world outside of the physical world was an inconceivable place for normal creatures. Only the invisible dragon could travel freely here. Another natural node found. Let's go. Liszt urged, and one man and one dragon flew to the third natural node. A moment later, the natural node was opened. It was a forest outside. When Liszt flew out of the natural node, he suddenly discovered an interesting problem. He had actually arrived near the Flaming Mountain, which was a branch of the Flaming Mountain range. The emerald dragon Ethan was placed in the mountain. As if sensing something, Ethan flapped his wide wings and flew over from the mountain valley. Roar! The dragon's roar greeted Liszt. Ethan, the environment of the Flaming Mountain is not bad, right? Liszt revealed himself and looked at the emerald dragon flying closer and closer. He used the Dragonheart code to communicate. Roar! When Ethan flew halfway up the mountain, he did not go any closer. He did not like the invisible dragon, so he naturally stopped. However, the location of the mountain he chose was not good. The rocks on the hillside could not withstand his weight of over 100 tons, and it directly caused a landslide. Fortunately, Ethan's reaction was not slow, and he flew again. However, Liszt noticed that the hillside that Ethan stepped on revealed a milky white mountain. At this time, he and Bard still had their crystal vision activated. In the crystal vision, the milky white mountain flickered with a faint chaotic light, which was the light of mana retroaction. With a thought, one man and one dragon flew over. Liszt directly jumped down from the dragon's back and climbed to the location of the landslide. He looked with his eyes and immediately raised his eyebrows. Jade. He immediately understood that this should be the jade vein that was the reward of the smoke mission. He took out a bone hammer and smashed the rocks around the jade. After the rocks shattered, as expected, milky white jade veins were exposed. Bard was not interested in the jade veins and he closed his eyes and dozed off. Ethan, however, rushed over excitedly. Roar! Seeing the traces of jade exposed in the mountain, the entire dragon immediately became excited. It was as if a chicken nest had become a phoenix's nest. It originally thought that it was randomly placed in the wilderness by Liszt, but it did not expect to find a jade vein. Roar! It stretched out its forelimbs and gently slid its claws towards the jade vein next to Liszt. Suddenly, a jade vein was broken by it. The raw stones, which were half rock and half jade, rolled around, revealing the even denser jade vein in the depths of the mountain. That was just the outer layer of the vein. All right, Ethan, don't waste it. I will send people over to mine the jade vein. When that time comes, you will have a share, eat as much as you want. I'll give you a mission. Go to the other mountains and dig a few more times. See how big this jade vein is? With the jade as a driving force, Ethan was very easy to talk to and immediately flew up. He flew to the waist of the neighboring mountain and casually swiped with his claws, and a new milky white jade vein was dug out. He drew 10 mountains in a row and all of them contained jade veins. An entire branch of the mountain range was buried with jade veins. Conservatively speaking, the reserves were more than 100,000 tons. Jade was bought and sold by the weight in the market. Suddenly obtaining a 100,000-ton jade vein undoubtedly made Liszt feel like he had been hit by a huge gold ingot. If I excavate all of this jade vein, it will probably be enough for me to use for 100 years. Roar! Ethan roared to express his thoughts. He wanted Liszt to immediately help him build a dragon nest here, and from now on, he would settle down in this jade mountain. As an adult dragon, he was smart enough to express that as long as there was a sufficient supply of jade, producing light emeralds would not be a problem. Alright, you can build your dragon nest here. I will send people over immediately, but it will have to wait until after the new year. The road between Mount Maelstrom and Flaming Mountain is not open yet. Ethan nodded to show that he understood. Chapter 858. The Volcanic Crater Natural Node, the Sea Natural Node, and the Jade Mountain Natural Node. On the way back, Liszt found 3 natural nodes. Among them, the volcanic crater and the Jade Mountain natural nodes were natural nodes that could be developed. When the invisible dragon saw the Maelstrom magic array, it directly opened a passage to return to the entrance of the Maelstrom cave, and then return to Fire City. He told Achi about the discovery of the 3 natural nodes. However, Achi was still summarizing the information of the magic gate for the time being and had not yet formulated a plan to develop the magic gate. She also needed time to practice space elemental embodiment. Once she mastered the space elemental embodiment perfectly, it would be of great benefit to the development of the magic gate, because she could travel through space with List and the invisible dragon. At that time, it would be much easier for Achi to arrange the magic gate herself. Brother, the more natural nodes you master, the better. Only in this way can you choose the most suitable natural node to open the magic gate and complete the magic transmission array. Understood. Leave this matter to me. Just as List was gearing up to explore the world beyond the material world, the smoke mission brought good news. Mission completed. Reward: cement. Obviously, the volcanic ash idea provided by List helped the craftsmen of the Fire Dragon brick factory to successfully develop cement. With the success of cement development, the booming development of the construction industry was just around the corner. Most importantly, Flame Island had endless volcanoes, where volcanic ash could be said to be inexhaustible. There was almost no shortage of cement for the construction of the future island. Congratulations, but cement should not be needed on Black Horse Island. I no longer intend to continue to develop in the Flame territory. I will maintain the current industrial pattern and fully focus on the development of Flame Island. List's thinking was very clear, and he planned to use the magic platform to give instructions. He told the Fire Dragon brick factory to prepare for relocation. When he returned to Black Horse Island next time, he would move all the craftsmen of the Fire Dragon brick factory to Flame Island. At the same time, he also planned to move the Guild of Magic as a whole, and then let the mages settle in the Fire Dragon brick factory and continue to develop new types of cement with the craftsmen. Volcanic ash could be used as a cement material, and other ash may not necessarily not be used as a cement material. However, when he saw the new smoke mission, he suddenly felt that his idea was a bit superfluous. Mission: the traffic between Black Horse Island and Flame Island is the biggest obstacle to the development of the Flame Islands. However, the preparation of the Magic Gate gives you another option outside of the Great Voyage. Why not find the natural nodes around Black Horse Island and wait for the Magic Gate to be established? Reward: middle-level dragon beast herd. This was the rhythm of building a magic gate between Black Horse Island and Flame Island. Once the magic gate was established, Flame Island and Black Horse Island would be connected. If I really build a magic gate with Black Horse Island as a foothold, I can absorb the Sapphire family as my followers and make the Grand Duchy of Sapphire a vassal of the Fire Kingdom. He rubbed his chin. He suppressed this thought for the time being and looked at the reward. I can't believe the reward is a group of middle-level dragons. Not just one but a group. I'm going to be rich. So far he had encountered quite a few dragon-type creatures. Dragon-type wild beasts included the blue blood horse, the black blood horse, the Banpo cow, and the estuary pig. Among the low-level dragons there were Lolth the rainbow whale and Loki the chocobo. Loki had evolved into a middle-level dragon thanks to the bloodline fruit. Of course, he had never seen a middle-level dragon. He had never seen a high-level dragon, but he heard that the Pegasus in the Pegasus Forest of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom were high-level dragons, and there was even a super dragon, a unicorn. List had always wanted to find a unicorn and see this legendary magical creature that only pure virgins could see. Among the super dragons, there were the Flame Dragon Bird and the Thunder Dragon Turtle. I don't know what kind of dragon this time will be. I hope it is a breed that can be ridden in combat. Let me take advantage of the opportunity to establish the Dragon Orders of Chivalry and contribute to the Burning Orders of Chivalry. List spent several days looking for new natural nodes and the results were really remarkable. He found 3 new natural nodes. However, 2 of them were in the sea, and he did not dare to go out for fear of drowning. The other one was above the sea. He used the sextant to locate it and found that this node was actually between the Flame Islands and the Whirlpool Islands, surrounded by the vast sea, and the development value was very low. If the natural node was near the sea with Achi's powerful ability to control water, he might be able to build another big whirlpool. However, it was too dangerous in the vast sea. Time went by slowly. List did not find any new natural nodes, and the New Year's Day was approaching. After another day of fruitless search, he found the big whirlpool magic teleportation array. Riding the invisible dragon Bard, he passed through the channel and returned to Fire City. Another piece of good news was received. A small team of knights found a broken statue of a moon killer man in a tribe of pioneers. Because this tribe had more than 30,000 people, the knight team chose to corrupt the ancient sorcerer to recruit the moon killer men to work in the forest. Not in a hurry, the statue was left in this big tribe named Dusk. Where is the Dusk tribe? List asked. Here. The captain of the night team pointed to a certain location on the map of Blazing Island. It was the basin of the Whirlpool River, but it was the basin of another tributary. The location on the map was very clear. This was the credit of Orders of Chivalry and the Sorcerer. Not only were they responsible for pioneering, but every time they reached a place, a sorcerer would follow them to measure the location and record the terrain. So far, on the new map of Blazing Island, the terrain of the Whirlpool River Basin had basically been explored. For the next step of pioneering, Orders of Chivalry was ready to advance to the Guangbao Forest south of the Whirlpool Mountains. You lead the way and choose a sorcerer who has learned moon language to follow me. Let's go to the Dusk tribe. List ordered straightforwardly. The news of the invisible dragon had basically been exposed, so when the knight and the sorcerer sat in the prepared wicker basket, List directly rode Bard, grabbed the basket and flew to the Dusk tribe. He and the invisible dragon were hidden in the material boundary, and only the wicker basket was exposed. It looked like the wicker basket was automatically flying in the air, and the scene was very strange. However, the Earth Knight Dennis and the Sorcerer Harold sitting in the wicker basket didn't have the slightest shame or indignation, only uncontrollable excitement. It's a dragon. An invisible dragon. Even His Highness can't see it, this is inconceivable. Dennis thought to himself, His Highness really has a second dragon. What kind of great dragon knight am I following? When the country is established, I will definitely become a noble aristocrat. Harold looked forward to it. His Highness the formidable dragon knight, and His Excellency the great magic shooter. I wonder if I can become a member of the court sorcerer in the future? Not all sorcerers were indifferent to fame and fortune, and their hearts were devoted to the truth. Most sorcerers were also keen on worldly power. Therefore, many sorcerers would become consecrated by great aristocrats, and even enter the palace to serve the aristocratic class. All of a sudden. Chapter 859. This chapter celebrates another guild master war song. Boom. The invisible dragon's firebird spread out, and all the moon killers of the Cloud tribe trembled under the firebird. Dennis and Harold couldn't help but feel nervous. But soon the firebird disappeared, and the invisible dragon's transparent crystal-like figure appeared above the valley. The ancient sorcerers of the moon killers trembled and looked up at the invisible dragon flying above their heads. They didn't know what to do and couldn't even think of resisting. Listener, come out and speak. Sorcerer Harold shouted in the language of the moon. I'm the listener of the Cloud tribe. Who are you? An ancient sorcerer in a black sackcloth cloak, holding a wooden staff decorated with a skull at the top, carefully walked forward. Ta, don't you recognize me? Dennis, who had been to the Cloud tribe before, lifted the mask on his helmet. The listener was called Tanasto, and the moon killers of the Cloud tribe called him Ta. Ta looked at Dennis with eyes that might have gone through puberty. His wrinkled face was expressionless. It's you, foreign flame man knight, a knight of business. When the night team attacked the moon killers, they all claimed to be businessmen and knight of the Flame Kingdom. An ancient sorcerer walked to Ta and shouted, Flame man, why are you still here? We, the Cloud tribe, have refused. Without food, we won't send men and women to work for you. You can refuse me. Dennis raised his head and said in high spirits, But you can't refuse my lord. He suddenly pointed to the sky and pointed to the invisible dragon hovering in the air. Big lies. Then he pointed to List on the back of the invisible dragon and shouted, Seiki. Biglized was a dragon and Seiki was a saint. The ancient sorcerers suddenly exclaimed. They looked at the sky in fear and shouted, Biglized. Seiki. That's Biglized and Seiki. The moon killers' ancient sorcerers had never seen a dragon, but they grew up listening to the legends of dragons. Saint was what they called their ancestors. Seeing Dennis shouting, they were stunned. They seemed to be playing along with the show. List unleashed his dragon's might once again, blasting the ancient magicians to the ground. After a few rounds of torment, coupled with Dennis and Harold swindling, the ancient magicians of the Cloud tribe dizzily shouted that List was Seiki and that the invisible dragon was Big Lizard, and then chose to surrender. Acting as a guide, he led List and the others to the statue in the valley. The statue was placed in a cave. There was a platform in front of the cave. It was probably a place where people usually sang and danced before the bonfire. The listening pagoda pointed at the grotto and chattered. Harold translated for List. He is saying that this is a statue of an ancestor, a saint like you, your highness. They are all descendants of the saint and they worship the saint. Tell him to move. Harold immediately translated it into moon language. Tower and the ancient sorcerers did not dare to resist. They stood aside and watched as List walked into the cave step by step. There was a statue in the cave. It was badly damaged and some parts were even supported by wood. It seemed to be stronger than the protection of the Holy Tribe and the Horn Tribe. Of course the strength was limited. List really didn't know what was in the minds of these moon-killing people. It was clearly a relic of their ancestors and they were so respectful, but they didn't take good care of it. Instead, they let these statues be exposed to the wind and sun until they almost turned into sand and stone. He didn't care whether the statue was broken or not. Seeing that the statue's hands were still there, and that it was holding a book, he was relieved. The moon-killing people had 6 statues on the holy mountain. He had already obtained the ancient artifact sealed in the hands of 2 statues, the Scepter of Time and the 8-Dragon Sword. Now he was about to get the 3rd ancient artifact. It looks like a magic book? He didn't think much about it. He directly jumped to the statue's hand, took out a bone hammer, and began to slowly hit the stone magic book. This action immediately caused a commotion among the moon-killing people. The listening pagoda shouted, "That is a relic of our ancestors, stop." Harold and Dennis glared and said, "Shut up, the great Seki wants to do something, you can only watch quietly." However, the two's act was not enough to scare off the moon-killing people. Under the lead of Ta, the ancient magicians shouted one after another, trying to stop List's action. However, List didn't stop at all. The invisible dragon directly activated Dragon's might and gave these ancient magicians a heavy blow for the 3rd time. The ancient magicians of the Red Cloud tribe didn't have as much backbone as the ancient magicians of the Holy Tribe. Under the pressure of the invisible dragon's might, they unwillingly shut up. Bang! List quickly broke the stone magic book. Sure enough, there was also a sealed artifact inside. It was in the shape of an open magic book, but the strange thing was that it wasn't a real magic book. It was in the shape of a book carved from a special wood. It remained open and couldn't be closed. There were no words on the open page, which looked very strange. He didn't look at it carefully and directly put it into the space ring. He found that it was easily stored. Probably not related to the Holy Dragon, this magic book seemed to be made of some kind of wood. It had neither the power of time nor the power of an elemental dragon. He jumped down from the statue. List let Dennis and Harold act as translators. He gave the Red Cloud tribe a good beating, forcing the Red Cloud tribe to open up native recruitment and allow orders of chivalry to enter and leave the Red Cloud tribe at will. However, he didn't take Dennis and Harold with him. Instead, he let them stay in the Red Cloud tribe. Anyway, they would be his serfs sooner or later, so the earlier he conquered them, the earlier he could contribute. On the way back, he took out the special magic book again and slowly fumbled with it. However, he didn't see any reaction from the magic book. "I don't know what the Scepter of Time does, but I also don't know how to use this magic book." This was a bit embarrassing. Since conventional methods didn't work, he planned to try using unconventional methods. He let Bard land by a river and sprinkle some water on the book to see if there was any reaction. Naturally, there was no reaction. This wooden magic book did not have any words written on it, and it did not have words that would appear when touched by water. Then is it because the paste is too thick? He thought of another strange idea, so he pulled out the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword. The 8 Dragons Divine Sword was a support-type weapon, not suitable for carrying around and fighting at all times. He scratched the magic book with the blade. He wanted to test the hardness of the magic book. However, a strange scene happened. When the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword touched the magic book suddenly released a ray of light. Then, on the originally wordless page, glowing moon language words condensed one after another. "This is." He took the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword away. The words were still there, but they were slowly dimming. He put the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword back on the page and the words lit up again. Amazing! He took out the moon language notebook and compared it with the words. He quickly found the general meaning of the moon language: Elven Blood, Ice Dragon Bone, Ice Elemental Transformation. This directly deciphered the attributes of the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword. List expressed his shock. The material of the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword was indeed the dragon bone of an ice dragon, and it had been soaked in the blood of a great elf. It could indeed transform any kind of chi into ice elemental chi. However, the magic book lacked one function. It could also seal chi domains in ice. Presumably, during the era of the Moon Empire, the knight probably hadn't developed chi domains yet. Chapter 860. To verify if the ancient book of knowledge was really so magical, List then tried to take out various artifacts and touch the magic book. The spatial ring touched it. Light flashed and a simple moon language appeared. Invisible dragon gem, independent space. The 8 dragon sword touched it. Light flashed and a simple moon language appeared. Elemental dragon strength, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, light, ice, darkness, amplification. The mystical dragon soul fruit touched it. Light flashed and a simple moon language appeared. Emerald fruit, emerald dragon strength, mystical dragon soul. List nodded slightly. So the mystical dragon soul fruit was called emerald fruit in the Moon Empire era. The dragon hind leg I found was indeed an emerald dragon's hind leg. The sapphire pendant touched it. Light flashed and another simple moon language appeared. Sapphire amplification. Then, he touched a golden pearl that had yet to be polished to it. Light flashed and an even simpler moon language appeared. Water element material. It's just a water element material. There's no more introduction? List was a little dissatisfied with the identification of the golden pearl. He also knew that the golden pearl was a water element material. Any magician or knight could figure that out. The key was what the golden pearl was used for. Putting away the golden pearl, he took out a phoenix feather. Light flashed and a simple moon language appeared. Phoenix feather amplification of fire element. This introduction is clear, especially the moon language name Phoenix. It seems that in the Moon Empire era, the flame dragon bird was already called Phoenix. Perhaps the legend of the Phoenix was inherited from the Moon Empire. He then took out a bloodthirsty bat fang. This was an artifact taken from a Black Knight family vampire. It was a powerful piece of equipment to help vampires train. He had originally planned to give it to Mary Dawn as a reward after she made a contribution. After touching the magic book, light flashed and a new moon language appeared, mutated blood element material. This introduction is a little interesting. Mutated blood element. It seems that the Moon Empire era had already studied blood magic, but there's no introduction to the bloodthirsty bat fang. For the next part of the journey, List kept taking out all kinds of artifacts to test, including the telescope, the one-handed sword, and other items that did not have magic power. The ancient book of knowledge could not be identified and there was no reaction. As for common magical equipment and magical materials, it only gave a simple introduction of XX attribute materials. However, when it came to the super dragon materials and the equipment made from dragon-type materials, it could clearly identify the raw materials and provide a brief introduction of the functions. How should I put it? List evaluated the ancient book of knowledge. In terms of identifying materials, it does have a very powerful function, and its value is immeasurable. However, it's only limited to high-end materials. There's not much meaning in identifying low-end materials. It's far from being an encyclopedia. Of course, one could not expect a special magic book to contain all the knowledge in the world. As long as a high-end material could be appraised, it was already extremely valuable. It was no less valuable than a divine weapon like the 8 Dragons' divine sword. When I get back, I can take the Scepter of Time from a Chi and have it appraised. I wonder what kind of appraisal results the ancient book of knowledge will give. Not long after, they arrived at Fireforge City. He gestured to the invisible dragon bard to rest first, and went straight to the wizard tower to find a Chi who was busy. A Chi, I found something good. What is it? Give me the Scepter of Time first. Taking the Scepter of Time from a Chi, List directly touched the Scepter of Time to the ancient book of knowledge. In the next moment, light bloomed. A paragraph of the language of the moon appeared. Twilight dragon gem, golden apple wood, reflecting time. A Chi was already familiar with the language of the moon, and directly translated the meaning of the language of the moon. Brother, are these words an introduction to the Scepter of Time? The Diamond of Time is the gem of the Twilight Dragon, and the scepter itself is made from the wood of the golden apple tree. The golden apple is a legendary treasure. Does it really exist? Since the ancient book of knowledge clearly gave an appraisal result, it means that the golden apple really exists. List now basically adopted an attitude of belief towards the legends of this world. The difference was whether the legend was exaggerated or not, and not whether the legendary item existed. Ancient book of knowledge? It is this magic book. This is a divine weapon I found at the hand of the third statue. It can appraise high-end dragon-type equipment materials and give a rough introduction. List pointed to the language of the moon on the book. The Scepter of Time is made from the Twilight Dragon gem and the golden apple wood, and its attribute is time reflection. What does time reflection mean, brother? I don't know. In fact, It seems impossible to activate it with magic power, which is why I gave it to you to study. A chi has no time to study it for the time being. Let's talk about it when you have time. In any case, the scepter of time is not going anywhere. At this time, a chi suddenly thought of something. Right, brother, can the ancient book of knowledge appraise sprites? Appraise sprites? List stared blankly. In fact, there was no need to appraise sprites. After spitting out the worm stalk, he could tell what kind of sprite it was. However, he had yet to appraise a living creature. His own hand did not count, and there was no reaction when he placed it on the book. Therefore he took out a sprite worm and placed it on the ancient book of knowledge. Then the magic book glowed, but only one language of the moon word appeared, sprite. Oh, do you think I'm blind? Do I need you to remind me that this isn't sprite? List chuckled at the ability of the ancient book of knowledge. Well, it's useless for me to keep this ancient book of knowledge. I'll give it to you, a chi. It just so happens that you often need to identify magic materials. A chi did not refuse. Okay. After obtaining the ancient book of knowledge, List's heart began to burn with passion for the artifacts sealed in the other three statues. He did not know what kind of special artifacts were sealed in them. However, he was not in a hurry. When all the moon killer tribes were conquered, these artifacts would fall into his hands sooner or later. So, he continued to look for natural nodes. Not only to complete the smoke mission, but he also really wanted to open up the passage between Black Horse Island and Flame Island. So as the days passed, he continued to search. Soon, the year 154 of the Sapphire calendar came to an end, and the new year 155 slowly arrived. The Thorn Castle did not have the joy and laughter of last year. The servants, under the leadership of Butler Carter, had a simple New Year's Day. The newly built castle in Firewood City was bustling with activity. List and his followers were celebrating the first New Year's Day on Firewood Island in the castle named Firewood Castle. Your Highness, I propose that this year be the first year of the Flame calendar. Today is the first New Year's Day of the Flame calendar. Duarte Red Apricot raised his glass and said. Chapter 861. There were no unknown reward quests for the new year this year, which was a pity for List, but it was a bit difficult to find the natural node of Black Horse Island. It was very difficult for the invisible dragon to set off from the Whirlpool Islands and cross more than 3,500 kilometers of sea, unless a chi checked the invisible dragon to Black Horse Island. However, although the invisible dragon had a mild temperament, he was unwilling to go into the water and didn't cooperate with List's arrangement at all. Therefore he could only enter the world outside the material world from the Flame Island, then find a natural node close to Black Horse Island, and then cross over to Black Horse Island and begin to search that area carefully. I hope to find a suitable natural node as soon as possible. At present, 8 new natural nodes and 3 old natural nodes have been discovered, but they are basically all within the range of Flame Island. I still have to go to Black Horse Island to find the natural nodes around Black Horse Island. List thought. The 3 old natural nodes were the entrance to the Great Whirlpool, the entrance to the Whirlpool Cave, and the entrance to the Hourglass Valley. 8 new natural nodes, the volcanic crater, the Jade Mountain for natural nodes in the sea, and 1 natural node on the sea far away from the island. The last natural node, which was also discovered near the end of the new year, was located in a lake in the southeast corner of the fiery island. There were many reeds on the shores of the lake, so it was named Reed Marshes. In other words, 6 of the 11 natural nodes could be used, especially the volcanic crater, the Jade Mountain, the Reed Marsh, and the entrance to the relic. If he could open the magic gate, he would be able to pass through the northwest, central, and southeast regions of the blazing island. Achi was still diligently practicing her space elemental incarnation. The preparations for the magic gate had already been completed. As long as she could perfectly master the elemental incarnation, she could open the magic gate at any time. List and the invisible dragon Bard spent a lot of time in the world outside the material world almost every day. The helix positioning had been improved several times, and it could detect any subtle fluctuations in the natural nodes. Don't worry, Bard. The natural node is just there, waiting for us to discover it. List was half consoling the invisible dragon and half consoling himself. It didn't snow on Inferno Island last December, and the temperature didn't drop below 0. But the weather was dry and cold, and it was even worse than a snowy day. The crops in the fields had stopped growing, and the elves had already gone into hibernation. There was no longer enough food in the forest. The animals that should be hiding and hibernating had long disappeared. It was January now. The dry and cold temperature was getting worse, allowing List to see the not-so-mild side of Blazing Island. It was a little hard, Your Highness. The potato harvest was not as plentiful as I had imagined. Taking in the Moonkiller tribe natives as serfs would consume a lot of food, and it would be hard to maintain the stability of Infernal City. Estuary City in the south has also sent us news of a food emergency. Should we postpone the incorporation of serfs? Durut Red Apricot had gained List's trust and was in charge of the development of Fiery Island. There's no need to postpone it. It's more difficult for us to kill the Moon People. At this time, it's very easy to use food as bait to tame the Moon People. I will personally transport food from Black Horse Island to support the use of the pioneering team. List relied on the fact that he and Ichi could continuously transport food and did not agree to Duterte's request. However, he felt very regretful. The potato sprite Kutcher was very useful, but the planting time was too short. Many of the potatoes hadn't matured yet and it was already winter. Under the influence of the dry and cold climate, even the great elves could no longer promote the growth of the potatoes. Otherwise, this wave of potato harvest could still support the consumption for half a month. Now, food could only be transported from Black Horse Island. I hope to find a natural node to Black Horse Island as soon as possible. As if his wishes had come true, just as he was worrying about food, the invisible dragon bard suddenly sensed abnormal feedback from a natural node. Let's go. Flying over and tearing the material boundary of the node, a set of skilled operations were completed, and the dragon and man had already seen the world outside the natural node. Well, this turns out to be the Heart Island. List flew out of the natural node and found himself on the Heart Island that had been dug out. The island, which used to be buried with the Emerald Dragon's hind legs, had been cut by half with the excavation of the Light Emerald mine. A large amount of soil and rocks had been dug out. A large number of stones were pushed down the cliff and piled up around the island, expanding the Heart Island to twice its original size. Very good. The location of this natural node is very good. It's only 600 kilometers away from Black Horse Island. List was overjoyed and finally found a natural node located in the Sapphire Archipelago. Although it was not around Black Horse Island, it could still be used as an alternative to communicate with the Sapphire Archipelago and the Flame Archipelago. He immediately rode the invisible dragon and flew high into the material boundary and flew in the direction of Black Horse Island. At the same time, he was also thinking about the location of this natural node. Why is it on the Heart Island? The previous natural nodes at sea and in the sea could not be discussed for the time being, but the natural nodes on land were very interesting. The crater used to be a large volcano, the Jade Mountain was full of jade, and it was not clear what resources there were in the reed marshes. The natural resources of the Heart Island were obviously the hind legs of the Emerald Dragon at the beginning. Is the formation of these natural nodes related to the real material world? Is there a strong magic that interferes with the material boundary to form natural nodes? He thought of the triangular theory of matter-spirit magic, where magic and matter were constantly changing to a certain extent. It is very likely that a place is full of magic or there has been a magic outburst event, which led to the formation of natural nodes. Of course, the study of natural nodes was not deep enough, and the essential reason was not yet clear. List no longer worried about it, flew all the way at top speed, and finally arrived at Black Horse Island when it was dark. Back on the island, the invisible dragon flew directly to the smoke grass plantation to rest, while List lived in Thorn Castle, enjoying the comfortable environment of the castle. The next day, after dealing with the official business that had accumulated over a period of time, without stopping, he rode Bard to look for natural nodes around Black Horse Island. Almost as soon as he entered the world outside the material world, he found a natural node. He skillfully opened the node, and the hole appeared in a closed lake. At the bottom of the lake was a magma channel that had already solidified. This is? The invisible dragon did not want to go into the water, but it could not resist List's guidance, and the lake looked very shallow, so it barely flew out of the natural node. Then it quickly rushed out of the shallow lake. Outside, it was a field of harvested crops covered with a layer of snow. Several serfs dressed in hemp clothes were placing bird cages in the snow. This scene was all too familiar. Black Horse Island. This is the Lake of Bones in Red River Town, the place where the body of the previous fire dragon was originally buried. Such a discovery made List feel extremely surprised. What natural node could be more wonderful than here? Sure enough, the place with the most conflicting magic on Black Horse Island is the Fire Dragon Burial Ground. And the burial ground also happened to form a natural node. Boom. Bard landed on the ground. List walked to the lake and looked at the small lake, feeling relaxed and happy. A cloud of smoke appeared in front of him, forming a serpentine text. Chapter 862. The Lake of Bones was filled with lake water. If he wanted to build the magic gate, the lake water needed to be emptied. It was easy to empty the Lake of Bones. He just needed to dig an opening and connect it to the Red River not far away. The terrain of the Lake of Bones was higher than the Red River, so the lake water could not be stored. Then he needed to dig the Lake of Bones into a square, and open the magic gate on the square. I don't know if the magic gate he set up will have too much turbulence and repulsive force. If it is like the entrance of the whirlpool cave flying out every time, it will still be a big problem to pass through. I hope the repulsive force can be reduced, and I can enter and exit at normal speed. Although this was what he was thinking, he did not do anything immediately. He still had to wait for Chi to inspect it personally before making a decision. There were specializations in every field. Coordinating the overall situation and fighting against the heroes were his forte, and the magic profession was Chi's forte. He looked at the new smoke mission, and after seeing the content, he vaguely had the illusion of a pain in the ass. Mission: build roads if you want to be rich. The development of Flame Island will face many problems, and the lack of smooth roads is one of the main constraints, especially for a knight. Without sufficient open space to charge, it will be difficult to unleash their combat power. Please build 500 kilometers of roads on Flame Island. Reward: Emily's new life of Chi. The mission reward was very good. The new life of Chi referred to the promotion of mid-level Chi to high-level Chi. Emily was about to become a Sky Knight, which was worth celebrating. As the only genius in the territory who matched the status of a Dragon Knight candidate, List had high hopes for this 14-year-old girl. He had been training her as a light green Dragon Knight. But Emily, who did not have a cheat, was still not as strong as List, who advanced from Earth Knight to Sky Knight in half a year, and then became a Dragon Knight in a few months. She trained as an Earth Knight for a full year, and from Sky Knight to Dragon Knight, it would probably take longer. She probably could not become a fighting force in a short time, unless the light green gem dragon recognized her and was willing to help her start training Dragon Chi in advance. If that was the case, then reaching the peak of advanced Do Chi was just around the corner. Emily is 14 this year, 15 next year, and 16 the year after that. If she's given a few more years, there's a chance that she'll be able to ride a dragon before she's 20. This kind of talent is really frightening. The only thing I have to worry about is that once her body develops, she'll probably be restricted as a female. There had been female Sky Knights since ancient times, but there had never been a female Dragon Knight. Female powerhouses were mostly concentrated in the field of mages. Although the 6 statues of the Moon Killer's ancestors had long been destroyed beyond recognition, one of them, which was the one holding the ancient Book of Knowledge, was a female statue. I hope Emily can break this rule and become the first female Dragon Knight. No matter what, List would do his best to nurture Emily. Even if she couldn't become a Dragon Knight in the future, she could still learn the Do Chi Domain Scroll and become a Domain Knight. The talent she had displayed was worth nurturing. Moreover, List could not tell if he had some unspeakable thoughts in his heart. Nurturing a Lolita. This smoke mission has to be completed as soon as possible to help Emily regenerate her Do Chi. However, the mission is too difficult. I have to build a 500-kilometer road on Flame Island. The road was not an ordinary path, but a road that could be used by a knight to charge. It was not limited to a stone road, even a dirt road could be used. However, the standard requirement for a road was that the road was very wide, very flat, and could not have too many curves. Generally, roads were built around big cities. There was a road around Ironhoof City that led to Bull Castle, which was 30 kilometers long. Now, to build a 500-kilometer road was a huge project. With the current strength of Infernal City, it would probably take more than half a year. When encountering a river, he had to build a bridge. When encountering a mountain, he had to dig a tunnel. If the terrain was too complicated, it might not be completed in more than half a year. I'll take it one step at a time. The discovery of the natural node on Black Horse Island allowed List to travel between Black Horse Island and Flame Island at will. After flying for half an hour in the world outside the material world, he successfully found the wormhole space fluctuation of the Great Maelstrom Magic Transmission Array. Then he rode the invisible dragon bard directly across the wormhole space and flew out of the vortex hole. Looking at the flowing waterfall behind him, List suddenly thought of something. He suddenly thought of something. I have 4 spatial rings and Chi has 2 spatial rings. If we add them together, we have about 400 cubic meters of space, which is equivalent to a large warehouse. Before the magic gate is established, I can act as a porter and use the space ring to transport supplies. Large items could not be transported, but valuables could be transported by him personally. He did not see a Chi in the Mage Tower laboratory. After asking Lucy and the twins, he learned that a Chi had gone out and would return in the evening. List was thinking about whether to take advantage of this time to go back to Black Horse Island and deliver a batch of rubber water. Suddenly, he received a report that the knight who went to the Red Cloud tribe encountered a large invasion of giant elephants. The Red Cloud tribe was unable to resist and had all moved into the sphere of influence of Infernal City. Giant elephants? List asked carefully and learned that it was a very powerful Earth attribute World of Warcraft that moved in groups. They did not hurt people, but they directly took away the warehouse where the Red Cloud tribe stored food, then wantonly destroyed buildings and plundered food. Everywhere they passed, the ground was trampled flat. Even the ground was trampled flat? Yes, Your Highness. The group of giant elephants is too strong. It is difficult for us knight to launch a charge. They stamp their feet, the ground shakes, and then our mounts will be unstable. Magicians' magic can't hurt them. They all know magic rock armor. Rock armor was an advanced earth magic. Dosa knew this trick. It formed a solid rock on the body, and its defense was no worse than mithril armor. List's heart moved. List rode the invisible dragon bard directly and flew to the Red Cloud tribe. After a few flashes, he had arrived at the valley where the Red Cloud tribe was located. After a little search, he saw the group of giant elephants that the knight had mentioned. There were about 100 of them, including elephants and small elephants. It was a large family group. The giant elephants looked very strange, very different from the common elephants. The most special thing was the huge jaws under their noses, which seemed to be infinitely elongated, long and wide, with a pair of big teeth in front of them. It was like a big shovel on the chin. And its tusks, which should have been long, were not protruding, only about 1 meter. Compared to a height of at least 6 meters and a body of more than 20 tons, the tusks were very short, and the nose was not long enough. Its limbs were short and stout, and its overall body looked bloated than the average elephant, and its head was not big enough. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.